Apologies, folks. I was so not paying attention to the time. Please excuse me for that. Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your evangelist of the imagination, and your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right. Robert Meyer Burnett, that's me, Rob, casting at you from this, the Robservatory. How are things? Wow, it's a pretty wide shot of the observatory. Clearly, stuff is happening in here, let me tell you. Didn't go on yesterday. There was work to be done. Sorry about that. Back today. Going to come back tonight for Western Weeks, which continues this evening with... Oh, well. That was terrible. That was a terrible Ennio Morricone. I was kind of taking in a breath while I was trying to do it. I apologize for that chalkboard nonsense. So my man Scott Mendelson, even though he's not my man, and once we went back and forth because I objected to something he wrote about the MCU, but Scott Mendelson covers the entertainment beat for Forbes, and I'll flat out just say I read everything he writes. He's a go-to columnist for me, just like someone like Jeffrey Wells is. I know, listen, Jeffrey Wells is a divisive figure. I understand, but I've been reading him for the better part of, I've been reading him for more than 20 years. I always read him. Scott Mendelson, always read him too. I always read Peter Bart. There's lots of people I always read in the entertainment business, because why not? Why shouldn't you read them? But Peter Bart had a really interesting column that I wanted to share with you about Netflix's most watched movie. And I thought it was fascinating. And there's a lot to unpack that has greater ramifications. Well, actually, for all streamers and really the entire entertainment business. Anybody who's looking to make media, whether it's television or movies, but now they're kind of both the same thing in our streaming world. And movies and TV were a performance-based business, meaning that if the work that you made performed quite well, it could be very lucrative, especially in television. Television is an interesting medium because at first TV shows spend more than they make, usually. However, if you have a hit television show, whether it's a Friends, whether it's an Office, whether it's a series like ER or House, one of these medical series, a Dick Wolf show, SVU, Criminal Minds, whatever, what happens with those shows is everybody gets paid to make them. You get paid a weekly salary. Sometimes the cast gets maybe whatever they're, not just weekly, but they get hired for a certain, whatever their rate is. If they have a track record in TV. And what ends up happening is if you have a hit show, everybody's kind of making their paycheck on it unless or until the show, it goes a number of seasons, 2 or 3, 4, whatever. That show is then sold foreign. It's sold to other countries. And every country is a different territory, and every country pays a licensing fee to show that show. That's when the real money is made. So what happens is, for instance, I've talked about how Netflix in 2019 paid $100 million for 1 year to show Friends. So that $100 million goes to all the people that have a piece of that pie. The actors, the producers, the production companies, whatever. That $100,000 was just, or $100 million, pardon me, it's $100 million. Did I say 100,000? It's $100 million. $100 million for 1 year. For a show that's old. So, as you can see, a show like Friends has an ongoing value that, well, you never know in this day and age. But that's a lot of money, and that was found money. That was money that was just conjured out of thin air because Netflix wanted to pay it. So you can see how having a hit zeitgeist television show, I mean, hell, Cheers is still being streamed. So TV can be far lucrative than movies, depending. Sorry, I apparently have breathed in some dust or something. So what happens is, though, if you work in TV, if you're a producer or you're one of the main stars, built into your contract is all of this. The money that you receive if it makes a certain level, if it reaches a certain ceiling, or it's sold into, everybody's got a piece of it. Usually the above the line talent has a piece of the show. So if it becomes more successful, if say your show gets sold to France, Germany, Spain, the UK, that's just money rolling in beyond what you've already been paid. If you got a piece of that show, you can make some real cheddar. And the people, look at Aaron Spelling. There's a reason why Aaron Spelling was one of the richest men in entertainment. TV, baby, when it works, it works. But that's only because, those shows could be sold again and again and again and again and relicensed. And by the way, this is a tremendous oversimplification. But I hope I'm conveying the general idea that a hit TV show can be sold. It's like having the same product you just keep selling again and again and again. And if you own a piece of it, every time it's sold, you make more money. It used to be that way. And by the way, the same is true of movies to a certain extent. They're performance-based. I mean, I remember when Tim Burton's Batman came out, it was a big hit. And Jack Nicholson made a very, very lucrative deal to be the Joker. Remember, as I always say, it ain't show friends, it's show business, to quote Bob Sugar, written by the great Cameron Crowe. But also, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And Jack Nicholson's agents, his people, his managers, his lawyer, whomever, made a very lucrative deal when he played the Joker. So when the movie's a big hit, he gets bonuses. Christopher Nolan famously carved himself out, I think it was a 20% of the gross. I mean, deals are deals. There's all kinds of deals depending on who you are. But performance-based deals, the more money something makes, the more money you make. Because they assume a guy like Jack Nicholson, a big star, when he's in a movie like Batman, it ups the value of the movie. So that's true. That's why studios used to pay, stars used to get paid a lot more money than they do now to star in movies. Like, Jim Carrey, got $20 million or something for The Cable Guy because Jim Carrey was on fire after doing things like Ace Ventura and The Mask. He was a huge, huge star, so you get the money. Eddie Murphy. That's how the star system, at least in the modern studio era, works. And again, gross oversimplification of what's going on. But anyway, along comes streamers. The thing about streamers are, like Netflix is not performance-based. What's great about Netflix is, for creators, for people like myself, if I was able to do a Netflix show, they come in and they're like, here's what we're going to pay you to make your show. Now, the Netflix model is not, if the Queen's Gambit becomes a huge phenom and it becomes a water cooler show, which it did, if, say, they're reporting 65 million, 85, however many millions of people watch it, Scott Frank doesn't get more money because a lot of people watch the Queen's Gambit. The model for streaming is essentially, it's a one-time payout. The difference is you don't have to worry about performance unless you want to do another film or another series in the long run with Netflix, which, everybody does. So you want to do your best job so you can get another payday. But if your show becomes a international hit or becomes a water cooler show and everybody's watching it, you don't get a salary bump, nor do you get residuals. Another thing that happens with actors, even actors that are low people on the totem pole, if a TV show or a movie keeps getting played and becomes successful all around the world, while it's on a very diminishing scale, you get what's called residuals. You get paid for performance. Like, if something continues to go every time it airs, depending on the deal you've made, you get paid. So it was a pretty great thing. Not so with streaming. And part of the reason that we hear famously that no one's sharing exactly what shows do really well is because if they were to share that data, say Scott Frank, Netflix wants to make, Scott Frank made the Godless series, and he made Queen's Gambit. If Netflix wants to go to Scott Frank and says, hey, Scott, we want you to do another limited series for us, Scott Frank would then go, well, guys, I mean, I did Godless, and look what the Queen's Gambit did for you. If you're releasing numbers, if say 200 million people watch the Queen's Gambit, yeah, you got to up my fee. Well, one of the great things about Netflix for them is that they're like, we'll pay for your movie. We'll come in and we'll pay the money at this budget level, but that's all you get. It's a one-time payout. You don't get residuals, and if it becomes a big hit, we don't share that with you. That model doesn't exist, which has been a big bone of contention with a lot of the guilds. The Writers Guild, the Directors Guild, because those guilds were set up with this performance-based system in place that they've been enforcing for decades. In the streaming world, it's kind of gone away. Now, again, this is an oversimplification of how the business used to work and works now. But that brings me to Scott Mendelson's article that was in Forbes. And let's see. Okay, he published this on November 20th. So this article is 3 days old. But I didn't share it because I wasn't here yesterday. Otherwise, I would have. But I wanted to read it and share it with you all now because this is a really interesting article. Jason Statham's most underrated actioner is Netflix's most watched movie. That's right. If Netflix can get big viewership for forgotten or theatrically ignored star-driven actioners, why should they bother to spend big bucks on their own action movies? Famously, the Russo brothers and Netflix are going to make a $200 million movie. Why spend that much money? Well, this isn't a surprise, but at least one of Jason Statham's best movies, especially among his action movies, is getting a bigger audience for at least the next few days. Judging by the theatrical box office, 48 million worldwide, but on a 22 million budget in 2013, you probably didn't see Homefront. The film actually grossed more worldwide than the likes of The Transporter, 44 million in 2002, Safe, my personal favorite among Statham's solo action vehicles, which grossed 40 million in 2012, and the Jennifer Lopez co-starring Parker, 47 million in 2013. It earned less than the Killer Elite, 57 million in 2011, but that Statham, Clive Owen, Robert De Niro action spectacular cost a whopping 70 million. Homefront concerns a retired DEA agent who moves in with his young daughter back to their late mother's hometown. A schoolyard altercation between his kid and a young bully leads to conflict with the kid's mother, Kate Bosworth, who is both a meth addict and the brother of a local small-time dealer, played by James Franco. While the kids eventually make up, the grown-ups have a harder time letting go, and, well, action and violence eventually ensues. It's like Carnage or The Slap, but with explosions, fisticuffs, and shootouts. It also works as a meditation on modern masculinity and male ego without using a yellow highlighter. It's a pretty damn stylish action drama that emphasizes the drama over the action. It also has a ridiculously overqualified cast, including Frank Grillo as one of the baddies, Clancy Brown as the sheriff, and yes, Winona Ryder as Franco's strung-out girlfriend. The film, directed by Gary Fleeter, who made Kiss the Girls and Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, and written by, yes again, Sylvester Stallone, keeps the focus on character and plausible human interaction. There's a skewed realism to the melodrama, including an emphasis on de-escalation and plausible reactions to the dust-ups. Everyone brings their A-game, including Statham, who knows not to try and upstage the more colorful supporting cast. Ryder is having fun, and Franco especially relishes his small-time criminal, who eventually realizes that he's the villain in his own story. It's a reminder that Sylvester Stallone, A, is very intelligent and thoughtful about the movie business, and B, wrote the first Rocky movie and directed the first 3 sequels, and C, didn't make a truly bad movie until Staying Alive in 1983, which, by the way, I'll flat out say, I loved Staying Alive. I saw it like 6 times in the theater. Sue me. His post-Rocky flicks were dramas like Escape to Victory, or just Victory here in the States, a film about POWs playing soccer, Fist, a Teamsters drama, and Paradise Alley, a 40-set drama about 3 Hell's Kitchen brothers who get involved in professional wrestling. Heck, even First Blood was a survivalist action drama about a PTSD-stricken Vietnam vet lashing out at small-town locals. The stereotype of Stallone as an action guy didn't really kick in until Rambo First Blood Part 2 in 85 and Cobra in 86. Homefront feels like a hybrid of Stallone's earliest work and his latter-day action flicks, as it's a character drama with action as opposed to an outright adventure flick. After a violent prologue, which feels right out of a Craig Baxley flick, Statham undercover with racist drug dealers riding a motorcycle as his long hair flows in the wind. I love that because he doesn't say it, but what he's talking about, what Mendelsohn is talking about, is Brian Bosworth in Stone Cold, which if you haven't seen, one of the great B movies of all time, Lance Henriksen, one of the great performances of all time as a villain. If you haven't seen Stone Cold, brah, why not? Why have you not? The picture really doesn't go full Statham until its final 30 minutes. It's a B movie with an unusually stacked cast and unusually specific characters amid a conventional but refreshingly logical narrative. It even avoids certain genre tropes. While Statham's young daughter does get damseled in the third act, it's almost accidental, and the cat lives. As far as its momentary popularity on Netflix, it's their most watched movie at the moment. It's another example of the streaming platform being just as popular, if not more so, for old-school Grindhouse action flicks as prestige TV and network binge favorites. I've written my share of posts about films like Peppermint and Columbiana being momentarily popular, and Liam Neeson's Unknown had a run near the top just before Honest Thief opened theatrically last week. Meanwhile, in a skewed irony, Outside the Wire is now sitting below the Lionsgate Millennium Studio programmer. Why spend a fortune on Netflix original actioners when studio discards pull in solid viewership for a fraction of the price? Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos reportedly remarked in 2019 that spending $115 million on J.C. Cander's Triple Frontier, a muscular actioner starring Ben Affleck, Oscar Isaac, Pedro Pascal, Charlie Hunnam, and Garrett Hedlund, may have been a mistake. To be fair, since then, Netflix has paid up for the Dwayne Johnson, Gal Gadot, Ryan Reynolds action comedy Red Notice, and is allegedly giving $200 million to the Russo brothers for the Chris Evans, Ryan Gosling actioner The Gray Man, while the Russo-produced Extraction, starring Chris Hemsworth, is allegedly Netflix's most watched original movie ever. Nonetheless, the continuing popularity of third-party star-driven actioners like Unknown, Homefront, and Jessica Chastain's Ava implies that new-to-you action flicks may be good enough for the Netflix consumer base. It's no secret that Netflix has seen seemingly decent viewership for the very kind of star-driven studio programmers, Patriots Day, How Will I Know, Mile 22, etc., that have been ever more ignored in theaters by consumers who only go to the movies for would-be event films. The great irony is that Netflix and other streaming platforms has led to an exodus from theaters for just-a-movie offerings, only for those same films to be discovered on Amazon, Hulu, and the like. It's not dissimilar to how new-to-you TV shows like LA's Finest, Cobra Kai, You, and Schitt's Creek become Netflix hits. That's partially why Roku just bought a bunch of Quibi shows for their platform. Now, what he's saying here is really something interesting to be pondered. Now, I would say this. I have always said that a movie, let's just say a movie, I mean, I know movies are less, they're 90 minutes, but let's say a movie is 2 hours long for the sake of this argument. It doesn't matter whether you're watching, and this is my own theory. It doesn't matter whether you're watching, say, Apocalypse Now, which was at the time very expensive, lavishly produced on location, a brilliant movie and one of my favorites. It doesn't matter whether you're watching Apocalypse Now or you're watching, say, I don't know, Tootsie. you got, well, I know Apocalypse Now is longer than 2 hours, but for this uh, example, just pretend it's 2 hours. It's still the same 2 hours. And when audiences are watching a film, they're not thinking to themselves as they're watching it, oh my God, Apocalypse Now, they use the actual Philippine Air Force to bring in those Hueys to shoot these scenes. How much did this cost? Oh my God. And then they're not comparing and contrasting and going, but on the other hand, I mean, while they did shoot on the streets in New York, Tootsie is basically a stage-bound, set-bound movie, and I'm sure it didn't cost a fraction of what Apocalypse Now cost. No. What people are thinking about is, for their 2-hour block of time that they've given over to watch whatever they're going to watch, were they entertained? I mean, Maximus, he should step out and ask everybody, are you entertained? That's all that matters. Nobody cares how much a movie cost. They don't. All they want to know is the 2 hours they've just spent watching whatever it is they watched, were they satisfied? Was the movie good? Were they entertained? So theoretically, what Scott's bringing up here, and the interesting thing, a company like Grindstone, which makes a lot of action movies like The Hitman's Bodyguard for Lionsgate, you know, these are perfectly serviceable films that they're making with big stars. Now, sometimes, you know, Bruce Willis's latest foray into the Z movie action genre, those movies aren't so great. But I grew up watching movies like Stone Cold, like James Glickenhaus movies, whether it was The Exterminator or The Soldier or McBain even. If you do yourself a favor and watch McBain with Christopher Walken. And as a matter of fact, watch any James Glickenhaus movie. I don't watch Exterminator 2. But my drift is that you'll be wildly entertained. That's why I tell people laugh when I say watch Stone Cold. Stone Cold is a movie where Brian Bosworth, after his football career petered out, was going to try his luck in Hollywood and plays a ridiculously mulleted cop that goes undercover in Lance Henriksen's drug gang. And let me tell you, talk about delivering the goods, Stone Cold will. Now, does it deliver James Cameron goods? No. And do I think that James Cameron shouldn't spend $100 million on Terminator 2? No. Because at the time, spending that money proved to be, it worked. But the audience doesn't care how much is spent. They just care, are they entertained or not? Boy, do I wish the producers of the modern of Star Trek of the last 12 years, I wish that they understood that. Doesn't matter how much money you spend on something, you can make a good Star Trek show with two people in a room, as evidenced by the penultimate episode of DS9's first season, Duet. But that's neither here nor there. But the point is, it doesn't matter how much money you're spending, it matters how great the movie is and how entertaining it is for audiences. That's why a movie like Homefront, great cast, well made, Stallone, who understands the genre, has written the script, and you get something that is just as valuable, just as entertaining as a $200 million blockbuster. And this is a lesson that needs to be learned. Anyway, Scott Mendelson goes on. I'm reminded of how the 1960s Batman show was canceled after 3 seasons, partially because ABC realized that the show's viewership had become mostly kids, and that those kids were content watching reruns. While there is value in pricey actioners like Michael Bay's Six Underground, like media coverage, prestige, and showing force, Netflix may be able to get away with filling the demand for action movies with new to you. I love this term, new to you. You might not have seen it before, even though it played in theaters 7 or 8 years ago, but it's new to you now. Why bother spending $100 million on entirely new action movies when audiences, the same audiences, who routinely ignore such fare in theaters and then complain that Hollywood only makes superhero movies, will lap that up, that star-driven actioner up like they missed in theaters and treat it like a newbie? This is a very good question that Scott Mendelson has asked. And I have to say, it's a very good question. I mean, I'll tell you flat out right now, there's a movie that I've wanted to make for a very long time that I'm actually in active development on. Not with anybody, but myself. I've been working on the script. I've been working with an artist storyboarding the film so I can make basically an animatic that can show the first part of the film to potential investors who say, well, Rob, you only made one movie however many years ago and it didn't make any money. And while you produce some things, why should we give you money to make this? And if I can keep the budget down, I've got a very specific cast in mind to make this movie. I really want to make this movie, and I think it would be great. But no one's going to give me $100 million to make a movie, so I have to make it for a lot less than that. But the idea is, if it's good, well, then, if it's a good story, and I don't have to spend money like $100 million, maybe I could get to make it. And the point is, when it comes down to it, are you entertained? Have you been entertained? I think one of the great things about something like Cobra Kai that began its life as a YouTube Red show, who would have thought? Why do people love Cobra Kai? Because it's wildly entertaining. It's wildly entertaining, and it knows what it is. And it's not trying to convince you it's not something else. Now, I don't think that there's necessarily that Netflix shouldn't spend big money on movies. But the thing is, when it comes down to their business model, what Netflix wants is subscribers. You know, it's not like you're a studio that hopes that you have billion-dollar hits, because that $1 billion drives your whole business model and allows you to make more movies, hopefully. But the problem is the studios got out of that mid-level action business. We were weaned off of those movies. I mean, hell, I think back to, I love the Jack Ryan films. I considered those adult, action-oriented, political thrillers. Hunt for Red October, Patriot Games, Sum of All Fears, Clear and Present Danger. I love Hunt for Red October, and I love Clear and Present Danger, and I like Sum of All Fears a great deal. I don't love Patriot Games as much, but I loved going to see all four of those movies in the theaters. No one is making those anymore. And the ones we are getting, look, that's why I go see the Fallen series. Olympus Has Fallen, London Has Fallen, and Angel Has Fallen. They're making another one because and I'm looking forward to watching movies like Greenland. Give me my Armageddon and give me my Deep Impact. No one's making those movies anymore. So there is a void. People like that stuff. I like B action films. I mean, Canon Films pretty much, they made their whole business model around those kinds of movies, and they're not getting made. So it's not surprising to me that bread and butter movies, that's why Grindstone, again, if you just look up Grindstone, I think it's Grindstone Releasing, look up Grindstone. Go to hell, you know what? I'll look it up for you right now because I can, and I'll make my point. Let's see. I hope it takes me, you know what? I need to go to the IMDb so I can make my point. So this is going to be an interesting exercise. Let's see. Hopefully it'll just give me what they say. Okay. All right. You know what I'm going to do? See, I should think about this, but my well, unfortunately, apparently, I'm not putting in the right. Oh, I'm in production companies. That's why I'm in the wrong place. I should go to all. So, so we got Grindstone Entertainment Group. Now, if you look at these cast, a movie like Last Nights, Clive Owen, Morgan Freeman, Rogue, Megan Fox is in that one, Unlocked, Noomi Rapace, Orlando Bloom, Toni Collette, John Malkovich, The Poison Rose, oh, that's a different one, John Travolta, Morgan Freeman, Brendan Fraser, Famke Johnson, The Frozen Ground, Nicolas Cage, Vanessa Hudgens, John Cusack, Dean Norris, Marauders, Bruce Willis, Christopher Maloney, Dave Bautista, Adrian Grenier, The Courier, Olga Kurylenko, Bond Girl, Gary Oldman, Force of Nature, Emile Hirsch, Mel Gibson, Kate Bosworth, Reprisal, Bruce Willis, Frank Grillo, Jonathan Cheech, Olivia Culpo. Survive the Night, Bruce Willis, Chad Michael Murray. Solace, Anthony Hopkins, Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Alone, Donald Sutherland. Acts of Violence, Bruce Willis, Cole Hauser, Sean Ashmore. Aftermath, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Scott McNairy, Maggie Grace. Heist, Robert De Niro, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Dave Bautista, and Kate Bosworth. Airstrike, Bruce Willis, and a bunch of Asian people. Assassin's Run, Christian Slater, Cole Hauser. Crypto, Luke Hemsworth, Jill Hennessy, Alexis Bledel, Black Butterfly, Antonio Banderas. Anyway, I could go on. So you have a company like this that is making mid-level actioners with reasonably A or B list stars that, you could say they're slumming, but they're making these movies and they're all coming out, being released by Lionsgate on video, and they all have trailers for the next movie that's coming out, and they're doing good business. It's a good business because they're making these movies for not a lot of money. The stars get paid big bucks to show up for a couple of days, if not just a day. They sell them foreign, they sell them on home video, and they make their money. Well, they put something like that on Netflix, and it gets a whole, like Homefront is not one of their films, but it can make a bunch more, it gets a lot of views on it, becomes a #1 film. Netflix is very happy. But the thing is, the people that are in these movies don't get paid anymore when they're on Netflix. I mean, they might get part of the licensing fee that Netflix will pay to get Homefront to be on Netflix, but if it does really well, if say 100 million people watch it, that's pretty good. That no one who is involved with the movie gets a piece of that. That's because not everything, that's not how streaming works. And the thing is, they don't want Netflix. The reason Netflix doesn't give out any information about ratings or viewership is because they don't want anyone to know this. So they don't want the talent to come back to them and go, bruh, if we're going to stay in business, you got to cut me a little, give me some cheddar there. I mean, obviously, I got you 100 million views. Scott Frank's like, it's pretty telling that he's not making his next miniseries at Netflix, which surprised me, actually. But I'm like, I get it, man. I understand because Netflix they don't care. Sure, they're going to spend $200 million on a movie, but that's not going to be their go-to position. They'll do that so they can say that, and they can tout it, and they can talk about it. And, you make a $100 million or a $200 million movie, not every day. But they can say they did it, whether it's a Scorsese movie like The Irishman, that was expensive, or they're going to make this new Russo brothers movie. Then they, or they make like a Red Notice with The Rock, Ryan Reynolds, and of course Gal Gadot. That's some big money right there. But then they have that movie, and it will, in fact, get a lot of people who are interested to come over. At least the subscription base already in place will probably dig it, but they'll get more people to come over. But they need that kind of fare that they also remember that they own. They're not paying licensing fees on that, and whatever your payout is, that's what you get. So they don't have to worry that in 5 or 10 years they're going to be having to share any revenue with anybody, because they won't. And those movies will exist on their platform forever. Like studios could re-release movies. They don't have to because they're always there for people to see. But they're building a library of their own titles, and that's what makes Netflix and any streaming service, Disney, HBO Max, they own all their stuff. And, well, they don't own all of it. They obviously are licensing a lot of stuff too. But, I mean, when they're making it themselves, they own it all. And it doesn't have, like, an afterlife. You're not licensing it to Australia or the UK or Germany or France or Spain or Russia or wherever you're going to license it to, Asia. You're not doing that because Netflix is worldwide. So you don't have to pay anybody, no matter how successful something is. But the people, the performers and the creators, eventually if something is big and successful and becomes a water cooler show, creators are going to say, you got to give me a taste. Otherwise, why would I work with you? And Netflix will say, we don't have to work with you. We've got plenty of people to work with us. So we don't have to pay performance bonuses. And it's an interesting place to be in. Right now, I think, and in my life, I'll tell you, most of the things that I've worked on, whether it's Agent Cody Banks or Agent Cody Banks 2, my own film Free Enterprise, Hills Run Red, these were one-time payouts. I wasn't clocking residuals from them. The only thing in my career recently that I have received a residual check for is John Campia's movie Trailers: A Love Story. That's why I will always be loyal to John. He is one heck of a boss, and he is scrupulously honest with his money. So good on you, John. And I think that's great. So that's what Netflix is doing. It's a one-time fee, and what I find interesting about it all is when you watch a Netflix movie, you can look at something like The Queen's Gambit and say, this series looks great. Obviously, they spent the money, but also a lot of that has to do with the way it was made. You had creator Scott Frank as a director and all of his collaborators. They really knew how to maximize their money with that show. The same was true of Godless. And that's when the talent rises to the top. You don't need $10 million an episode to make, say, Star Trek. Oops, it always comes back to that. You don't need that kind of money. You can still create great programming, compelling. You've got the same amount of time, whether it's an hour or whether it's 2 hours. If you can make a compelling story about a couple of people in a room for 2 hours that costs $2 million, but it's riveting, or you spend $100 million for a movie like Six Underground, which is probably more than $100 million, which one's more satisfying? Would you rather watch My Dinner with Andre, or would you rather watch When Harry Met Sally? Is that more entertaining than Six Underground, the last Michael Bay film that he made for Netflix? Beautifully made film, Six Underground. I thought it was pretty ludicrous myself, and didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to. I'll still go back and watch My Dinner with Andre, two guys sitting at a table at a restaurant talking. I still find that much more entertaining than Michael Bay's Six Underground. And yet, one cost how much, and the other cost how much? I mean, you're talking about probably a difference of $150 million. Same amount of time. Which one's more entertaining? It's an interesting question to ponder, but I find it interesting that a movie like Homefront can find a new audience on Netflix. Now, what's interesting, everyone was paid off back in 2013. Nobody expected that Homefront was going to go anywhere and have a second life. But lo and behold, Netflix comes along, and suddenly the movie's a success. Probably getting more successful, at least in terms of viewers, more eyeballs on it than it ever got. Now, the question I will leave you all with is, does everybody who was involved in Homefront, whether it's Jason Statham or Kate Bosworth or Winona Ryder or Clancy Brown or Sylvester Stallone, when that movie goes to Netflix and has a second life, should the people that made it get paid? And that's the real question. My answer to that is, yes, they should. And the thing is, in our world of streaming, more often than not, they're not going to get paid. Netflix put it on. You never know how it's going to. But I do think that there should be some kind of residual system in place. That's what the Writers Guild says, the DGA. They've all got this problem because that's how the unions themselves got paid, through dues, obviously. But also their constituency was used to getting paid via performance bumps. And I think that there's something to be said for that, because after all, Netflix is selling everyone else's talent. And I think, if talent wins out and something becomes successful, they should give a taste. They should give a taste to all their creators. At least I think so. What do you think? Am I wrong? Tell me. Write in. But anyway, let's see what I got here. I'm going down to the letters, folks. Going down to your letters. Got a lot. Kenny McBride. Kenny McBride writes in and says, I thought the discussion on Fight Club was pretty amusing. It seems to me that the writer of the article dismissing Fight Club as a destructive proto-fascist text just shows that different people can get very different things out of the media we all consume. I hope this letter isn't too political for Robservations, as I know you don't enjoy getting overly political when there's great genre fiction to talk about, but at least it might distract you from Ezra Miller as the trash can man. I don't know if you guys are watching the Stan miniseries or if you saw Ezra Miller as the trash can man, but oh my. The article does start well. It's true that the end of history narrative was a big part of the Clinton-Blair-Schroeder axis that guided the Western world through the 90s. The end of communism did create a certain change of mission and identity for the great powers of the world. We probably don't need to talk about the crisis Russia faced and is still contending with. And China wasn't yet the enormous economic and political threat it has since become to the power of the U.S. and its allies. But it was a huge cultural shift. Movies like Top Gun, Red Dawn, and Rocky IV, the real end of communism in my humble opinion, didn't really make sense anymore. The end of history wasn't just about that, though. At the same time as the end of the Warsaw Pact, the triumph of Reaganism and Thatcherism was more or less complete. Clinton was not an FDR or even Jimmy Carter. He, like every Democratic president since then, would have been a Rockefeller Republican in the earlier years. Here in the UK, Thatcher said her greatest achievement was Tony Blair, because she had turned the formerly Socialist Labour Party into a party that adopted the essence of her philosophy. The third way that guided Clinton, Blair, and Schroeder, along with a number of leaders in other wealthy Western nations, was basically right-wing economic policy with a bit of socially conscious window dressing. As Thatcher famously said, there is no alternative. The Thatcher years had also led to consumption as a lifestyle and an economic driver, not merely the process of attaining life's necessities. Shopping was a pastime, a hobby, a form of entertainment, not just buying what we need. Conspicuous consumption, the idea of being defined by the labels on our clothes, the size of our homes, and the power of our cars, was how we expressed ourselves rather than through our communities, our jobs, our churches, and our families. These combined to create a real sense of alienation for young people in the 1990s. Generation X was known for being slackers. Sidebar, Richard Linklater is a genius who didn't really care about anything and were disengaged from politics and the reality of life. Reality bites indeed. Other big issues were happening too. Here in the UK, we saw a huge amount of deindustrialization through the 80s and early 90s, so traditional male jobs were gone in many of our big cities. In their place came jobs in the service sector, which were increasingly feminine roles, in quotes. Feminism also had an increasingly powerful voice in our culture. That's not a bad thing. But for men without jobs, or at least without meaningful careers, many of whom grew up in fatherless homes and whose masculine essence no longer had a viable outlet, even in the military, which had less and less value in a world without a major enemy, it certainly began to feel for some as though being male was a personal failure. It is out of this cultural milieu that Fight Club emerged. I can't speak to the book, I've never read it. But the film is certainly a commentary on that world. The narrator is defined by his possessions. He is neutered by his life. He does a job that saps his soul and which he knows is without moral value, but he sees no other options. After all, how can he afford all those goodies in the IKEA catalog? It is the very emptiness of his life that leads him to the support groups. His therapist suggests he goes out there and see what real suffering looks like, but instead he finds an outlet for his own pain. It's easy to see him as an emotional vampire. Indeed, that's exactly how he sees Marla Singer at first. But the fact that this man experiences real emotional expression and finds camaraderie in a room full of men who have literally lost their balls, and in Bob's case, started to physically resemble a woman, is not a coincidence. The narrator's pain is real. His life is utterly without meaning, and even his therapist has told him his suffering is meaningless. It's only natural when someone comes along who offers him a different path, and he pursues it. Enter Tyler Durden. Yes, Tyler is an alpha. He runs his own business, refusing to do meaningless work for someone else's profit. He is confident, witty, knowledgeable, wise, and rejects all the bullshit that society has tried to force on him. He is everything the narrator wishes he could be. He offers the narrator an explanation for everything that's gone wrong in his life, from the failure of fathers to the emptiness of consumer culture. He literally sells the overconsumption of the wealthy and powerful back to them in a sick, twisted explosion of irony. The Fight Club itself is the ultimate expression of masculinity. Tyler gives the narrator, and eventually thousands of other men, a chance to be men, without shame or apology. Through violence, arguably one of the defining features of masculinity, he grants the narrator the chance to truly express himself for the first time in his life. All his deeply suppressed rage at the society that has neutered him can be unleashed, and instead of being condemned, it is celebrated and praised. Over time, that rage becomes more focused. Tyler creates Project Mayhem, which gives members of the Fight Club a chance to become something more than themselves. Indeed, they give up their individual identities and devote themselves wholeheartedly to the cause. They resemble an army in many ways, with uniforms, regulation haircuts, and brutal basic training. Of course, they also resemble a cult, where individual identity is sacrificed for the teachings of a charismatic leader. It is notable that the targets of Project Mayhem are corporate art, representing the commercialization of what should be a more noble pursuit, and cloned coffee shops, representing the increasingly soulless corporate world. Project Mayhem, as Tyler warns us, is with us everywhere. It is the men who do degrading low-status jobs. It is the men who work for minimum wage and meaningless jobs, not creating anything or self-actualizing in any way, but instead serving rich food to wealthy gluttons. They have no hope and no future, so their anger grows until they are subsumed into a cult of violence and revenge on society. The Project Mayhem soldiers in the back of the car don't wish to be violent soldiers of the revolution. One wants to paint and one wants to build his own home. Nobody has given them those options before, though, so instead they follow Tyler's more psychotic goals because he tells them that those things are possible if they just believe in Project Mayhem. Crucially, though, it's when Project Mayhem's objectives become clear to the narrator that he starts to realize how dangerous it all is. He's suddenly aware that it is a cult, and he tries to deprogram some of the members, particularly when Bob dies. But by that point, Tyler's teachings have gone too deep, and the cult can no longer be controlled. It's only then that the narrator begins his frantic search for real understanding to find out who Tyler Durden really is. What he learns is, of course, the big reveal of the film. He has been Tyler all along. This gives the viewer a whole new perspective on the film. Firstly, the beginnings of the Fight Club, when Tyler asks the narrator to hit him, is actually an act of self-harm. The narrator wants to hurt himself, as Trent Reznor put it, to see if he still feels. In the vacuous world in which he lives, physical pain is the only way he can find meaning. Fighting other men then becomes the only way to express his pain. But the fact that his first fight is with Tyler makes clear that the whole process is self-destructive. When we realize that all the lessons Tyler has taught him were actually his own thoughts, we realize that Tyler's confidence and insight were all there already, but he was too trapped in his own ennui to see it. When we see Tyler and the narrator's contrasting attitudes to the new recruits, we see that the good cop, bad cop dynamic is actually playing out inside his own head. When he realizes that he's been fucking Marla this whole time, we see that he had the possibility of a redemptive love if only he'd been able to conquer his own inner demons. The whole point of this film is in the duality. Yes, the narrator's life is without meaning, and the world is full of soulless Starbucks and empty consumer culture. The answer, though, is not to give in to the burn-it-all-down instinct that Tyler's side of his personality represents. Tyler is a warning to the viewer of what happens if men allow their ennui to turn destructive. In fact, self-destructive urges. The story of Fight Club is a satire on the emptiness of modern culture and how that can suck the life out of men and the beauty out of art. But it's also a commentary on how easy it is for men to end up going down dark, dangerous, ugly paths if the right person comes along and tells them that they have all the answers. In the end, the narrator can only save himself by achieving some self-awareness and killing Tyler, destroying the toxic masculinity that resides in his own mind. Of course, by then the damage is done, and even though the woman, his redemptive love, is there with him, the outcomes can't be changed. Once Project Mayhem has been unleashed, it's already too late. Tyler, the narrator, isn't in control once the idea has been released into the world. In the end, all there is destruction. My point is that the author of the article you read out simply doesn't understand Fight Club, and anyone in the, quote, alt-right or any of the other groups he cites who sees Tyler as a role model and Project Mayhem as an ideal method of organization has seriously missed the point, too. It's absurd to hold a film responsible for people who completely misunderstand its meaning. Fight Club is not Birth of a Nation. It doesn't celebrate hatred and violence. It very explicitly criticizes toxic masculinity while also giving excellent insight into why hateful and dangerous ideologies slide so easily into the minds of vulnerable men. If more people understood what Tyler Durden really is and where his ideology ends up, maybe fewer of them would be so willing to follow people who espouse similar burn-it-all-down attitudes. Anyway, I know this was a really long letter, but I thought it was important to talk about a film that actually has something to teach us, if only we're willing to learn. I hope the author of that article is paying attention. He might learn to love an incredible film and maybe also learn something real about the social problems he identifies. Thanks for all you do, Kenny. Well, Kenny McBride, I would say, that letter knocks it out of the park. I completely agree with your analysis of Fight Club, and I totally understand. And I think you're absolutely correct. And we saw some of this play out last week in our own nation's capital. What I've always found interesting is, especially what we saw during some of the protests in the summer in Seattle, I found it strange that some people wanted to go in protest, take over part of, well, up on Capitol Hill, which is a place that I spent a lot of my youth, take over blocks of a city in protest. Because in my mind, it's like, well, it's easy to go take over blocks of a city when you didn't build them yourself. When you've already got all the infrastructure there, and there's sidewalks and parkland and all these things that other people's tax dollars and other people's efforts created. I'm waiting for any of these people that are protesting, the idiots, and yes, I say idiots in Portland, that have basically destroyed an American city, and the idiot government, the local and state government that allowed it to continue. What a shameful, shameful display that's happening in Portland that has been allowed to go. I've never seen such a failure, a monumental failure of all sides. I mean, what I find really interesting about that is I was watching the other day smashing windows, spray painting things, and I was thinking to myself, why don't you try and go, if let's say let's just say for a minute as a thought exercise, we burn down everything. We burn down all of these people that are protesting, that are smashing windows, that are spray painting things. Let's just say they succeed in tearing down everything, the fabric of our entire civilization. What are you going to do then? What are you going to do when you have 300 million people that no longer have infrastructure? They no longer have goods and services. They don't have any of the things that our civilization provides. What are you going to do? You're going to take care of these people? I mean, I see these assholes, these idiots, these selfish, self-aggrandizing fuckheads who go around and smash shit that other people made, other people took care of. They're not offering an alternative point of view. They're not going in going, hey, let's build up this new civilization. No, they're just saying, let's burn it down. Let's burn it all down. Fuck you. Fuck you. And fuck the windows that you break, and fuck you for doing it. I hope you all get thrown in jail. If I had run Portland, I would have called in the National Guard after the first night, and I would have clamped down that shit. Do you know why? Because those people that are doing it are saying that everything that they're talking about or everything that they're doing is more important than other people. And that's wrong. It's wrong. We live in a civilized society, and we should all agree that if we're going to do that, we all should have enough wherewithal and understanding that every time you do something like that, you're taking something away from somebody else. Now, these protests all began with people like when someone's losing their life, of course we're angry. That's something to protest. That's something that all of us can agree on. That, my God, if people are losing their lives, they have nothing more to lose. That's it. They're gone. And as I've said so many times in this show, man, every single life that is left unrealized, unlived the way it could have been, is a great tragedy for all of us. because there's only one of each of us on this planet. But, anyway, I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole, but a great letter, Kenny, and I think you do a great job of breaking down why Fight Club is an important movie and it has important things to say, and the people that have used it as a manifesto to create their own Project Mayhems. I mean, I'd love to see all these people, all of these protesters. Why don't you go organize and go buy a plot of land somewhere and build your utopian civilization from scratch? I mean, God knows Oregon's the place to do it. The Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh did it. Go make your own Rajneeshpuram. Why don't you build your own civilization from scratch and see how hard it is? And realize that it is such a luxury to have a metropolitan city with great infrastructure to run around in and take over and then smash for your own petty little whatever your ideologies are. Go build your own civilization and see how hard it is. Take care of people en masse. Figure out how to work the plumbing, how to get power to people, how to get shelter to people. What happens when you have business owners? Try and go build a civilization from scratch before you burn down the civilizations that already exist here. Because when you do that, all you're left with is a pile of rubble. And you're going to be looking around going, what the fuck do we do now? So anyway, Fight Club's about that. Kenny, thanks for that letter. What an awesome letter it was. Anyway, let's see. Julian Mushkin writes in and says, greetings to you, Rob, the moderators, and all of the Post-Geek Singularity members currently watching or simply listening in. Today, I would like to discuss some thoughts I have regarding the most recent season of The Mandalorian. But first, I would like to borrow a quote from Marathon Man and ask, is it safe? Nice reference. After all, we're not that far removed in time from the season finale, and who knows, there still could be some out there who haven't seen it. To those few uninformed, in your best salty pirate voice, I warn you now, there'll be spoilers ahead. I will state for the record that I'm very pleased with both seasons of The Mandalorian. I've enjoyed meeting new characters inhabiting the Star Wars universe, as well as getting more lore about a period that has been pretty spotty in that regard. Technically, the advent of the volume technology has been simply amazing, and the showrunner's emphasis on practical effects on set during shooting has really helped bring back the feeling and flavor of the original trilogy. One of the elements of storytelling that I find always helps is when the actions and decisions of the characters happen organically out of events surrounding them. That is, when our characters must make a decision to act, it is seen as a natural reaction of that character to do so, not that they are doing something simply because the plot demands that they do this or that. A skillful writer will usually be able to craft the story so that we arrive at the end of the story without being aware of these manipulations. In the second season, I came across a few instances where I felt the needs of the plot were a little too obvious, and our dear Mandalorian, Din Djarin, made some decisions that seemed pretty out of character to me. One of those was in episode 6, second season, episode 6, The Tragedy, when, in his encounter with Boba Fett, he's asked to remove his jetpack during their negotiation. I have no issue with him taking it off in that instance, but it did seem an odd request for Boba to make. My issue is with the actions that follow. When the Imperials do show up, Din's first thought is for Grogu, naturally, but what does he do? Does he grab his jetpack from the ground and fly up to make sure Grogu is safe? No. Instead, he beats feet up the hill. When he gets there, he finds the young lad surrounded by an impenetrable energy field. Deciding Grogu is safe, Din returns to help Boba and Fennec fight the Imperial troops. The fight takes him further away from the area where he left his jetpack, so that when the Dark Troopers descend on Grogu's position, he can't even get up there to fight them. How convenient. Did I like the episode? You bet I did. Seeing Boba Fett show up was awesome, and I was gratified to see that Ming-Na Wen's Fennec Shand was still alive. The action was wonderful, but seeing elements of the plot so clumsily obvious took a little sheen off the final product for me. But I think my biggest issue is with the story decisions made near the end of the season finale. Yes, the big one, the reveal of the year, where a million voices suddenly cried out in delight and wonder. I have no issues with that. I was very happy to see Luke wrecking shop on those Dark Troopers. What I found odd were the decisions being made by our characters on the bridge of that cruiser as they waited for the Dark Troopers to pound their way through the door. They set up with their blasters pointed at the blast doors, the heroic last stand, except that Din already knows the Dark Trooper armor is pretty resistant to blaster fire, having repeatedly fired point blank at the one he finally stopped with his Beskar spear. Perhaps the heavy repeating blaster Cara Dune was using might put some punch on that armor, but we don't know for sure. What we do know is that our heroes have in their possession two weapons we know can take them out, the Beskar spear and the Dark Saber. But no, Din sets up with his blaster, as do the others with their weapons. It's like they forgot those two weapons even exist. What a lucky thing Luke Skywalker arrived to save their bacon, right? It's like these trained warriors suddenly forgot how to set up a competent defense. And it certainly was convenient that just as the Dark Troopers were making some decent damage on the blast doors, they stopped because one warrior arrived to fight them. What? They have 2 platoons of these things. Surely the AI controlling these things would have allocated the ones at the door to continue what they were doing. But sure, isn't it cool to build up the slow reveal for one of our favorite Jedis? The party on the bridge watches the screens in amazement as this Jedi warrior cuts his way through the droids like they were so many paper dolls. What would actual competent warriors have done if they were stuck on the bridge in that situation? They had no knowledge a Jedi was going to save them. They had 3 people in Beskar armor, 2 in light armor, a Beskar spear, dark saber, and a heavy blaster, which may or may not be able to punch through that droid armor. I would expect Din to pick up the dark saber. Who cares about ownership rights now? We're possibly fighting for our lives. Din hands the spear to Bo-Katan and tells her, go for the neck. Cara could either hand the heavy blaster to Kuska Reeves because she's in Beskar armor or use it herself, but she would be more vulnerable to blaster fire from the droids. Fennec could possibly use her sharpshooter skills to get shots off at either the eyes or the neck of the droids. What would be imperative, though, is to control the point of entry. Here's where storytelling makes a difference. Instead of our heroes acting like their lives depend on each and every action they make at this instance, their actions become subservient to the plot, and they make decisions that serve the plot, not the character. Their decisions in this instance do not feel organic to the story. Even if the droids had stopped, as they did, we would have seen our characters behaving logically to the demands of the situation. But how much more exciting and full of tension would it have been had some of the Dark Troopers continued to pound away at the door while the rest attempted to deal with the interloper coming from the other direction? While Luke fights to get off the bridge, our band of warriors, while Luke fights to get to the bridge, our band of warriors tries to hold them off on the bridge. Perhaps the Dark Troopers break through, but their pounding has damaged the door so much that it will only open large enough to let one through at a time. Din and Bo-Katan use the dark saber and spear to try and fend them off, but the numbers start making it difficult to keep them out as one after another tries to get through the door. It's a race against time. How much better might the scene have become? Certainly, I would love to get this chance to ask Jon Favreau and Peyton Reed about their decisions regarding this. Rob, you're a creator, a filmmaker. What are your thoughts regarding when a character's actions become artificially subservient to the demands of the plot rather than growing organically to meet the situation? Thank you for taking the time to read this. At least it was not as long as the last couple letters I've written. Cheers. Well, and that letter comes from Julian Mushkin. Well, Julian, I think, first of all, wow, see, you guys are crushing it with these letters. I think that you're absolutely right. And it all comes down to great writing. And, I think one of the things about The Mandalorian, while I've quite enjoyed watching it, I think the writing is a little rudimentary. And I think this is a perfect example as to why. I think you're asking what you're proposing here, I think would have been a great way to make the situation even better. But I think that also, Favreau, when he's writing these kinds of things, he's definitely his writing is very, I think, simplistic, which isn't a bad thing because he's trying to appeal to the kid and everyone. But I think you're absolutely right. You could have created more peril. But also, if Luke Skywalker has come back and is wrecking shop, would anybody have really cared about the tactical situation in the bridge as much as you're saying? I think it's a balance. I think that they, in this case, made a choice. I think your way is better. I think it would have been better for our main characters because, after all, it's not the Luke Skywalker show. It's called The Mandalorian. And we have multiple Mandalorians and they're fighting. So I think that absolutely, I think that you are correct about your observations. I think that's I think those were good. Very, 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 very good. But I agree with you. I really do. I agree with you. And what is it that what do you do? Where do you go? Do you give the audience, if you're going to do something crowd pleasing, do you go and please the crowd? I mean, I think you do both. I think what you described would have been great for the scene. It would have made the scene better and even that much more exciting. But again, that's also a level of writing sophistication I don't necessarily think this show has. So, yeah. So anyway, a great letter and something definitely to ponder. And I'm hoping, I hope the writing in The Mandalorian gets better than it is. I really like a lot of it, but it's pretty rudimentary. and maybe that's the way Star Wars needs to be, but I think we're definitely missing out on some of the great writing. And great writing is always, the better the writing, it's always better. Star Wars will be made better. Star Trek certainly will be made better. You can't go wrong with bad writing. Speaking of writing, Double Crit writes in. Oh, I love this letter. Hi, Rob. First time writing in. I sent in a few super chats laying out some thoughts on the subjectivity versus objectivity of film debate, which I know you and your pal John Campia bring up occasionally. I wasn't thinking and sent these in during an Elizaviews stream, and they weren't relevant, so you jumped ahead, which is totally reasonable. Instead of trying to donate again, I figured I'd write a letter since I get to flesh out my argument. All right. Disclaimer, I haven't written much since college, so this might suck in terms of the argument and writing quality that, you know what? I read, or maybe not, maybe I didn't. Disclaimer, I haven't written much since college, so this might suck in terms of the argument and writing quality. I don't think this is going to be 100%. I don't think this will 100% convince anyone one way or another, but I just want to put this out there and see if anyone likes it. I think the belief in objectively good film creates a paradoxical situation, making it an untenable position, meaning subjectivity is the only position that makes sense. First, what does it mean to have an objectively good film? It means there's some impartial, unambiguous criteria we can use to declare films good or bad. John says that the lack of such criteria proves that film is subjective. Maybe it does. But I think we can discuss this without fully defining the criteria. Let's just assume that if a criteria exists, filmmakers have access to it and can follow the criteria to make a good film. In that case, would any filmmaker not follow this criteria? In a world where film quality is subjective, maybe. But these are provably objective criteria of a good movie. So if a filmmaker chooses not to follow any of these items, they're choosing to make a lesser movie. I'm not a filmmaker myself, but I can't imagine that any of them would want to do that. So my assumption is that if we can prove that objectively good film exists, directors, writers, etc. will create objectively good film. Not strive to create, just create it. I believe that in this world of objectively good film, film sucks. When everyone is following the same rules and producing film with the same qualities, does that not become insanely repetitive? Wouldn't that become predictable? Filming styles would become mundane. Audiences will always know certain things will happen. The creativity would be gone. Anyone who tries to experiment must do so within the confines of objectively good film criteria, which can't be too loose or nebulous. Otherwise, it's not useful as objective criteria. Something like the plot has to be interesting doesn't work because, well, what does that mean? Instead, the experimental filmmaker would still have specific rules that limit what they can do, assuming they still intend to create a good film. Audiences will inevitably become tired of seeing the same things over and over again. The paradox is that good film is now also bad film because at the end of the day, film should captivate the viewer. To say otherwise is to imply that we'd enjoy objectively good but utterly boring film, which I don't believe can be said in good faith. I think we can look at the gaming industry to support this reasoning. Like film, making games is a creative process in terms of story, gameplay, art direction, music, all of it. I'm not saying you have to be creative or make financially or critically successful games, but there's a reason gaming circles focus on the latest and greatest new experiences in favor of yearly Call of Duty, Madden releases. I know those series are very popular and they're generally well-made, competent releases, but they never really get people talking because they're so formulaic. While there are people content to buy nothing but every year's new installment of the franchise, these aren't exactly the arbiters of game quality. So I'm not speaking on behalf of all gamers, just the ones who would actually be qualified to judge game merit outside of their personal preference. I think that no matter the form of art, intelligent consumers thrive on new experiences, and the introduction of objective quality criteria inherently stifles creativity. So even if objectively good art criteria existed, could a creative choose to not follow one element? And is their art still good? If so, that means that specific criteria didn't actually define good art. A logical contradiction. I understand the incentive behind this viewpoint. We see a movie, love it, find some morons online trashing it, and we wish there was a way to literally prove them wrong. I've been there before, but I've also been on the other end, arguing that a movie sucks versus people who think it's great. For instance, The Phantom Thread. In the end, I just accept that people aren't going to agree on everything and move on. No offense to you or anyone who believes in the objective film quality, I just think it falls apart under enough scrutiny. I hope people enjoy this letter. Double crit. Now, I think I read this letter before, but I love this letter, and I want to talk about it some more. Anyway, here's what I find interesting about all of this. When I say that I believe in the objectivity, I do think that certain art, great stories, great movies, great TV shows, anything, let's just call it all, for lack of a better term, human media, whatever. I do think that there is objective goodness in this. But here's the thing. We don't know what that is. We can't define it yet because we have nothing that can measure it. There is an element, I would dare say, in my belief that there is an objectivity to great art. There is an alchemy. There is a magic that we don't even yet understand. We just know it when we see it, kind of like something that's obscene. And there will never be a criteria for it because that magic is the culmination of many different things that I think it's impossible to control. I've always said that there is an alchemy involved. There is a little bit of Rumpelstiltskin spinning straw into gold in all of these things, in art. It is something, I don't know, call it connection with the first truth, call it the collective subconscious. I don't know. I don't presume to know, but I do think it's there. I do think that there are times when art captures something about the collective experience of human existence that is recognizable to all of us or not. Whether we recognize it or not, it doesn't matter because it's still there. The problem is the subjectivity of art means that, hey, your opinion is as valid as anyone else's, which I'll tell you why I think that's a really dumb argument. And I don't think everybody's opinion is valid in terms of this objectivity of art. I think people's opinions on what is right for them are beyond reproach. I would never tell somebody that what they think about something is either right or wrong. If you and I are talking about a TV show or a movie or a book or a video game or a painting, I'm not going to ever tell you, bruh, you're wrong. Because if you tell me how something affects you, who am I to say that's wrong? It's absolutely correct. Now, I would say this. You might have grown up in an arena or an area or a place where you know nothing about the paint or the painting that you're looking at. You might go to one of the great art galleries. You might be in Florence, and go into one of those galleries or wherever you are in Florence, and you know nothing about painting. Nothing. Nothing about painting. You know nothing about the people that painted the pictures you're looking at. You knew nothing about the era of when they were painted. You know nothing about what's going on with these, how this relates to any other paintings that were done at the time. So is your opinion about that artwork valid in terms of, could you assess that art as to whether or not it's great? I would say no. You shouldn't have any opinion about that art beyond what you think of it at the moment because you don't know shit about what you're looking at. So Why is your opinion? I don't care. I don't for something like that. Your opinion is your opinion, and how it hits you is important to you. Like if you can stand in front of a picture and go, "That's a really those dudes. Look at those dudes in their funny hats and when boy wasn't life 600 years ago interesting." Now, your opinion of that painting is not invalid because that's how it struck you. But if you know nothing about that painting, then your commentary on whether that's a good painting or a bad painting or whatever kind of painting it is at all means nothing because you don't know anything about what you're looking at. So your subjective point of view is certainly your point of view, and I would never presume to say you're wrong, because based on the knowledge that you possess, well, that's what you think. And if that's what you think, that's fine. But that doesn't make the painting good or bad, because you're not qualified to comment on it. And I don't like this idea that and by the way, I do believe that there is an objectivity that's somewhere in your mind. I think that an objectively beautiful painting, more often than not, even though you know nothing about this painting, if the painting has some kind of an effect on you for whatever reason, the brush strokes, the colors being used, the composition, there's something in that painting that will stir something within you somewhere. You might not know what it is or why it is or how it is. Hell, you might not even like paintings at all, so you're going to dismiss all paintings. But I do think that something in these objectively great pieces of art, and I do believe they're there, transcend our own opinions, and they somehow reach something inside us. Something, look, we can't really explain consciousness, and I do think that there's a lot, not to get metaphysical or anything, but I think there's a lot about the world that we don't understand, certainly our own existence. And I think that objectively great things can have that effect on people, whether we know about them or not. I mean, I really do. I really believe that, and I've always believed that. And the same is true of storytelling. Again, movies, it's not just stories with movies. It's the images that you're seeing. It's the cinematography. It's the acting. All of this, when you put it all together, there's a million things that can go wrong. But if there's that alchemy that happens, and even the best filmmakers have bad days or bad movies or bad decades, but those great movies, everything comes together with that magic sprinkled dust, that creative alchemy that happens. The Rumpelstiltskin, this movie was straw, now it's gold. I do believe that. I honestly do believe that. Now, is there a criteria? No, because everyone's trying to make a great movie. I don't think there is a criteria, because that would be really, really difficult to define. It would be very, very difficult to define. And I think that there is something that we don't yet understand. There's something about our own existence and the whole idea of wanting to make art and what art is. Why do we tell stories? Why do we paint pictures? Why do we video games? Whatever media it is. We just don't get it. We don't get it all yet. And I don't think there's ever going to be a criteria. I have to say, I have faith that there is objectively great art. And there are things contained in the objectively great art that are there. I know because I felt it the same way. You know what? Just like I don't begrudge people who are great, who have felt the Holy Spirit or whatever it is they think of, whatever it was, something, they feel something. Do I want to tell them they don't? I think that objectively great art is self-evident. And while I don't think we can quite define it yet, maybe one day we will. Maybe we need quantum physics or something. We need quantum computing, and maybe one day we'll figure out what that is. But until that happens, we're not going to know. But I do think it's there. I really do think that it is there. And while I know I've read that letter before, I keep thinking about this subject because people keep writing to me about it. So, Joe Geiger writes in, Hey, Rob, it's been a while since I last wrote to you, but I thought I would check back in and contribute to the conversation surrounding one of your favorite subjects, the objectivity of great storytelling and movie making. Well, let me tell you, Joe, how apropos. Frankly, I think even you miss the mark when defending how some movies are better than others. I would take a much more platonic approach instead of an empirical one, analyzing what makes stories great, since empiricism and objectivity are different. Rather than trying to gauge what's going on in someone's brain while watching something, I believe the goods of a movie lie in its component parts. Is the source material, if any, rooted in something, for lack of better descriptors, true or durable? Examples being scripture or Shakespeare. How attuned is the writer to the subjects of the tale? Are the writer, producers, and director on the same page about what the movie is trying to accomplish? Is the director able to adequately communicate with their lieutenants and the department heads and the cast with each other? The interplay in those dynamics is where I try and find value in something I'm watching. I tried to keep this short and sweet since you recently stated you prefer more brief letters so that you can have time for more people to contribute. I hope I made sense while doing that. Regards from Minnesota, Joe Geiger. No, Joe, you know what? Long letters, short letters. There are such things as letters that get too long. I do think that. And I can tell when I'm reading them when they're too long. But I think, I think what you're basically describing is if you've got a great story and you've got everybody on the same page, you have a visionary director and he's able or she's able to convey that vision that they have to the rest of their department heads and everyone's on the same page. That is definitely a part of how objectively great movies are made. So I totally agree with what you're saying. Absolutely. So, yes. This one comes from our friend Jonathan Thaddeus Butcher. To Robert Meyer Burnett, the stalwart steward of Star Wars, the wonderful wizard of world books, from your friend in Sci-fi, Jonathan Thaddeus Butcher. Dear Rob, my best buddy that I have yet to meet. Happy 600th. Thanks to the Richard for his reminder. Here I am writing to you again about pop culture from our own or my and your youth. The 70s had begun to fade away, less lime green furniture in the Butcher household. I would just take this opportunity to reminisce about the early 80s and how wonderful it was being young in that decade. Now that I think about it, the 80s all seem to be a great big beautiful tomorrow. Everything, including my own sexuality, were big, bright, and flashy in the 80s. By the way, speaking as someone who remembers the 80s, Wonder Woman 84 was so un-80s. I could not agree with you more, Jonathan. But please indulge me, good Sir Rob, for a look at some early 80s memories eons ago, of course. But I still have some few brain cells left that can remember it for you wholesale. Circa 1982, we had Reagan, Madonna's first album, and sci-fi was blooming exponentially. My gosh, I had a scrapbook that I would put ads in, film ads in the newspaper, shock. The Sunday LA Times was always chock full of tabloid-sized ads for the upcoming genre films. It was like getting a mini poster every week. Bless you, LA Times. So many great films. Some of the many. E.T., Raiders. Well, Raiders was 81. Conan, Blade Runner, Dark Crystal. Do you notice a pattern? Yes, pop culture that would live on until today. Oh, and horror. Creepshow. I Want My Cake, you bitch. Luckily, by this time, I was able and willing to sneak into R-rated movies. I felt so naughty doing that, but with so many great films playing simultaneously, sneaking into movies could turn into an all-day event. My parents, until they passed blame on the Rocky Horror Picture Show as my introduction to sleaze and sexual innuendo. Being a confused boy of 15, I liked sleaze and sexual innuendo quite a bit, actually. This may sound strange, but Rocky Horror Picture Show became, to my group of geeky friends, a rite of passage. Okay, R&B, we know that your least favorite film of all time was the Rocky Horror sequel, Shock Treatment. Like many film soundtracks, I got a hold of the Shock Treatment album before I saw the film, and I fairly much enjoyed the songs. Lullaby, Thank God I'm a Man, Shock Treatment, and Bitchin' in the Kitchen. My friends and I love the songs, quirky and weird like we all were. To challenge you, Rob, in your hatred of that film, it worked for my 15-and-a-half-year-old mentality. It was toe-tapping fun. And then we finally saw it. I was of the mindset of, huh? When I saw it, I didn't like it either. But over the last 35 years, it's kind of grown on me. Just like weeds, which I started smoking, were more words, less pictures. No internet. Eek! What's a young gay boy to do? I just kept using my world books. That was gospel. Thanks again, Rob, for keeping this downtime interesting with all of your goodies. I have dubbed you the wonderful Wizard of World Books. Graphic to come soon. I hope you're talking about the World Book Encyclopedia. Happy 600th, and please share a very important bit of info with me. Page break. What is your skincare regimen? Your skin sometimes looks like smooth alabaster, and you're a year older than me. Kisses to Elizabeth and to you from San Francisco. In geekus decorum, Jonathan Thaddeus Butcher. You know, I Elizabeth will tell you as I'm getting older, but I like a lot of Dermalogica products. I use Dermalogica products. I like expensive potions and things to put on your skin and your face. I appreciate that. But that's basically what I use. Dermalogica face cleanser, and underneath the eyes and stuff. And I have to tell you, I know we've seen these ads a million zillion times. They do not pay me, but lately I've been using a lot of Dr. Squatch soap. They're hideously expensive, but I like them. But I used to love like Body Shop vanilla scrubs, all that stuff. But that's kind of where it goes. So appreciate your writing in, Jonathan. What a fun letter to read. So thank you for that. Would you believe Omar94 writes in and says, "Hi, Rob, moderators, and Post-Geek Singularity. Congrats on making it to 600 episodes of Robservations. If you keep it up, you'll reach 1,000 episodes by the first quarter of 2022. Oh, my God. Most of today's entertainment has become filled with so much relevance to what is happening in the world right now, to the point we're being hit over the head. I don't know why creators are obsessed with pushing relevant issues in our faces. I have no problem with incorporating relevant issues, only if it's done in the background and never to the point of interfering with the story, because at the end of the day, all I want is good stories and good characters. In my opinion, the best person at incorporating relevant issues into stories without hitting us over the head was Rod Serling. Before he did The Twilight Zone, he was still able to incorporate relevant issues relevant issues of the real world into his scripts. When he worked in craft television theater, he wrote the very acclaimed episode called Patterns, about the dynamics of the business world with a power struggle between a veteran corporate boss and a young executive. He did other acclaimed episodes as well, which incorporated relevant issues such as anti-Semitism, bigotry, and racism, like Noon on Doomsday and A Town Has Turned to Dust. When he did make The Twilight Zone, he did the same type of thing with episodes such as The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street and The Obsolete Man, just as a few examples. Whenever I see those Twilight Zone episodes, I always think to myself, why can't modern creators do what Rod Serling did back in the 50s and 60s, where he put stories and characters first and had the relevant issues in the background? I know it's important, but I don't want to be hit over the head with stuff like that. I just want good stories and characters. That is just something frustrating about most modern day creators in entertainment, where we are being hit over the head with relevant issues first and the stories and characters second. Thanks. Live long and prosper." Omar, another great letter. I love your letters. I have an answer for you. Here's my theory, and I see this all the time. Stories themselves should be at the forefront, and I think the great stories there's a universality to the great stories. And I think Rod Serling, a lot of the great fantasists, Ray Bradbury, Rod Serling, Charles Beaumont, these people could tap into the universality of the fantasy of the stories that they were writing. I think a lot of modern writers are, in fact, they're trying to show you how great they are by writing socially relevant stories, so they're considered to be socially relevant or politically aware or whatever people. And I think that you even hear the creators of Star Trek now saying this. They're not telling relevant. They're not telling universal, timeless stories. They're not interested in that. All of modern Star Trek, it seems to me, especially Star Trek Discovery and Picard, are shamelessly guilty of the creators injecting themselves into the stories that they're writing. They're telling stories that they want to be patted on the back and told how great they are, whereas Rod Serling wanted the story to be patted on the back. If anything, Rod Serling became known because he wrote so many great stories, and of course, The Twilight Zone, we saw him. But I think Rod Serling would like to tell you, I think if he was in conversation with you, he would say it's much more important that when you think about a Twilight Zone episode, sure, you think about Rod Serling, but you think about the story first. Modern Star Trek, what does anybody... I can't tell you. They haven't told one story in Star Trek Discovery that I think is worth repeating. Not one. Whereas you go back to the original Twilight Zone episode right now, every single person, here's an exercise. What's your favorite Twilight Zone episode? I bet you all have one. I bet you all have one. And you can tell that story from beginning to end. Most of the people, at any rate. Everybody's got a favorite Twilight Zone story. Maybe younger people don't, but if you grew up over the last 40 years, you have a favorite Twilight Zone story. You know why? Because the story is more important. The story is more important. All great writers know that the story is more important than the people that are writing the stories. That should be a universal truism. And modern television writers especially, they're all fucking guilty of it. Not all of them, but some. A lot. Anyway, I think that just a thought. Let's see. There's so many. There's so many here. There's so many good letters. DK. Oh, this is a good one. You know what? I love this one. Before I jump into this one, you guys are going to love this one too. Let's see what you guys are saying. What are you saying? I have no idea. That's what I'm going to find out. What are you saying today? A lot of people have a lot of things to say, I've been noticing, so let me get on this and see what you guys are saying. Willow Yang says, who are you betting will win in Godzilla vs. Kong? I really hope that they don't cop out with a draw. I think we win, Willow. It was like Aliens versus Predator. Whoever wins, we lose. I think it's the opposite with Godzilla versus Kong. Whoever wins, whoever loses, we win. I mean, I don't think that. I think what's going to happen is they're going to have to team up. They're going to have to find some common ground to defeat an enemy that is as yet unrevealed. But honestly, you really can't have one or the other win. Because if anything, Godzilla, kaiju, the kaiju represent they represent nature. They represent, of course, you could say Godzilla represents the soul of Japan, and indeed, maybe she does. But I think that maybe Mosura represents the earth or whatever, but Godzilla, I think, represents the planet, whereas Kong represents the individual. Kong's an individual. Kong doesn't fight for the planet, whereas Godzilla does. The aliens from Planet X throw King Ghidorah down on here, the three-headed monster, and King Ghidorah is a threat, an extraterrestrial threat, an existential threat to the Earth. So Godzilla steps up, whereas Kong is the individual. Kong is the man, or the woman, or the human, or the thing, the intellect, the emotion, love. Godzilla does not feel the way Kong feels. I mean, that's not to say Minya. Look, I got Minya right over there. Godzilla's kid right there. See? But I think that's the difference. So you can't have one or the other win. You need them working together. You need them working in tandem. And I think that's the lesson of the movie. The lesson of the movie is that Godzilla and Kong represent the holistic, the earth, the wind, the skies, all of us. We need both. We need both to defeat whatever the hell it is that they're going to throw at us in that movie. Cobra Kai Never Dies sends in a super chat and says, thanks for all you do. Keep up the great job. Well, Cobra Kai never dies. Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that. Thank you so much. But this next letter doesn't think so. But it'll be fun. We'll get into it. Paul in Long Beach says, Stanley Burrell was a ball boy for the Oakland A's during the late 70s. Reggie Jackson gave him a nickname. Stanley grew up to become known as MC Hammer, named after Hammer and Hank Aaron. R.I.P. the home run king. You can't touch this. I didn't know that. Is that true? Stanley Burrell is the real name for MC Hammer? That's amazing. I like that you... That's absolutely right. Hank Aaron. Rest in peace. Stubble McShave says, I watched a few episodes of the 60s Batman, and I noticed 3 things. 1, everything is labeled, sometimes even the villain's secret lair. 2, the guest actors, often big names, had a lot of fun on set. 3, Batman is extremely conservative. He pays for parking for the Batmobile. Adam West Batman was the ultimate Republican. Scotty R37 sends in a super chat and says, Viceroy is Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, a great fictional band. Well, are they? Hang on a second. Are they a great... they are a great band, I would say so. I mean, I would say... I don't know. Are they as good as... I mean, the thing is, do you think they're going to bring him back? I mean, that's the question. Are they going to bring him back? Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem? I think the greatest fictional band... There's a couple of... I don't know if you can say they're the greatest fictional band. Let's run down some fictional bands. Wild Stallions. Spinal Tap might be the greatest fictional band. The Hong Kong Cavaliers, fronted by Buckaroo Banzai. Eddie and the Cruisers. The Fabulous Stains. The Wonders. How many fictional bands can I come up with? Of course, none of them have the power of the felt. So, I hope they come back. Calvin Bowes says, I am so tired of waiting. Do you think it's likely that October is No Time to Die's real release date? John and Cappy and I were talking about this. You know what? I want to see No Time to Die so goddamn bad. I mean, I really do. I love the Bond franchise, and it's going to be 18 months. The Bond, No Time to Die will have been done for 18 months. You know, I used to have these weird thoughts in my mind. I know, a shocker, right? I used to have these weird thoughts in my mind, and I was like, I would think about movies that I loved, you know, and I would think about, and I think I came up with this when I saw Empire Strikes Back 26 times at the UA 150 Theater on 6th and Blanchard in downtown Seattle. They blew it up. Don't look for it. It's not there anymore. But it was great while it lasted. But I would think to myself that, like, that when I wasn't sitting in the theater, it would freak me out that the movie was still playing, that the story was unspooling for a bunch of other people, a bunch of strangers. And I always wondered, did they have the same emotional response to it? Like, did they feel the same things? Did they understand the power of The Empire Strikes Back the way I did? And ever since then, I've always had this this is gonna seem a little weird. I mean, I look over to my shelves of physical media over there, and I have discs I might not have looked at for a year or 2 or 3 even. And I look at them over there and I think to myself, that's not fair. Like, in that disc, there's all of the things that it takes to make a movie, you know, that's like I got today. I'll show this in our show tomorrow, but I got Ishiro Honda's double feature, The H-Man and Battle in Outer Space. I forgot I even ordered it. To go along with, of course, Warning from Space, because you can never have too much Japanese science fiction in your life. So, you know, these discs have these movies on them, like Every Moan of Jaws or Roy Scheider, All That Jazz, or Romeo's Bleeding, or The French Connection. You know, Roy Scheider's characters they're there. Those stories are there. You know, they're happening. They're contained on these discs. They're not playing in movie theaters now, but these stories are, even though you're not there, they're still going on and they're still affecting people and people watching streaming shows. It was just a weird thing that I always thought that it was strange that other people were experiencing these movies that I loved when I wasn't a part of it. Like, Were they feeling the same things that I felt when I saw it? I hope so. But the idea that these were little slices of a universe that were constantly happening that I wasn't a part of, I don't know if that makes any sense. It was just weird to me. Well, I feel that way about No Time to Die. I feel like there's like a 2.5-hour James Bond story they spent $250 million to make. Or it's 3 hours, right? It's like a 3-hour movie. I can't believe that whatever's going on in that movie, that I have no sense of it. Like, I feel like 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there's a James Bond movie out there that I haven't experienced, that I haven't internalized. Like, it's out there. It's out there, but it exists. But I haven't seen it yet, and that freaks me out. I'm like that experience, because, movies, for people that love movies, they're experiences. You learn something from them. Their life. I've always said that in addition to movies being objective, watching a movie is a life experience. I mean, you might not be the protagonist and it's not happening to you, but it's still a life experience. And when you're into it, you take certain lessons out of it. You internalize what's going on in that thing, and you in that movie, and you carry it out with you when you leave. That's so weird. I'm pretty wacky, but I think I believe that, and the life experience that I could glean, or the emotions I'm going to feel, that No Time to Die exists. And it's only because I love the Bond franchise. I'm such a Bond fan. I start thinking about it, and it bothers me. Like, it really bothers me that there's a James Bond movie that's been in the world for a year now, done, that I haven't seen. And I understand it has nothing to do with the economic reality of how much it's going to cost, how much it costs to make that film. It's just the experience. Like, there's this incomplete Bond experience that I haven't had, that it's out there. Like, I feel like I'm being kept from it. I'm being constrained. My imagination is being held back simply because it just is that weird? I guess that's weird. But you asked me, do I think it's going to come out in October? You know what? I won't be able to answer that question until like July. But they're now talking about the pandemic, even in the LA area, isn't going to be even managed until 2022, even with the vaccine. So, I don't know. Cobra Kai Never Dies sends in a super chat and says, what TV show or movie in the past would you like to bring back into a season series or on any streaming service? Well, the one I've actually tried to is Jerry Anderson's UFO. I have a take on that. It only ran 26 episodes, and I don't know if anybody would ever do that. I know they were looking into doing that, but I would like to do UFO. I think Bill Hunt and I have a great take on it, and that's what I'd like to do. Calvin Hoses BR says, have you ever noticed in Bond films how many times he kills security guards and people who are not really involved with the caper? Just a minimum wage earner? I know, but they're cannon fodder, Calvin. Cannon fodder. I know it's terrible. It's horrible. It's like all those people who got blown up on the Death Stars. Chloe is here. I like this, Chloe. Chloe says, which style of movie would you prefer to make? The movie that tells you about the bomb, but you never see it, or the movie that shows you the bomb? One being more suspenseful by the imagination, or the one with more cause and effect by seeing it? Well, Hitchcock would show you the bomb and then set up the idea of suspense and when is the bomb going to go off. I mean, that was kind of what he did. I think it's important. I think it's really, wait a minute. I knew it was going to be raining all day, but it's pouring. I think it's important to show the bomb before you blow it up. I think you need to see it. Calvin Bowes goes on to say, Braxton asked, with James Bond License to Kill, does that mean he can kill anyone he wants? What if he killed someone and he was not on a mission? I love that. A very good question, Braxton. Is Braxton 6 now? I think Braxton's 6 right now, Calvin. I think that's a great question to ask. I think James Bond's License to Kill, it probably doesn't have a lot of caveats with it, but I think based on who he is and what they know of him as an agent, they would trust him not to use it and just kill anybody. I don't think he'd have to be necessarily on a mission because people might come after him. If he's not on a mission, somebody might come after him. and try and kill him, and he'll kill them first. But I think that part of getting your license to kill is to know that you are you're not just going to kill somebody indiscriminately. Heel versus babyface. Az is here and sends a very nice super chat. Thank you, Az. Mark's a comin', meaning Mark from Battle of the Planets. Heel versus babyface. Az and I have been doing on Hot Toys on his channel and on my channel, Fully Articulated. We're going to be doing that again this week. And Mark from Battle of the Planets, a statue. I guess it's a Prime 1 statue. I'm not sure. But we're going to have an unveiling, and it's going to be great. And I am very excited because I am a big Battle of the Planets fan. Mr. Tickletrunk sends in a super chat. Thank you, Mr. Tickletrunk. Emil Johansson is here and says, don't want to get too personal, but I understand your anger about Portland. It can be applied to things over here as well, but it's a sensitive subject. But I feel your anger. Listen, my sister lives in Portland. Good friends of mine live in Portland. The people that I work with on crisis medicine live in Portland. And I'll tell you, their lives have been diminished. Good people, their lives have been diminished by a bunch of, I'm going to say it, selfish assholes. It's one thing to say that you're protesting, but watching the kind of behavior and the smashing of buildings and all that, what's really interesting is, like, who's going to clean that up? When you smash a window, what you're doing is you're creating work for somebody that's got to go in and pick up your mess. You are taking away from the rest of the people that live in that city. And for what? Are you offering something? What are you offering? You're not offering shit. You're a selfish fuckhead. And I hate it. I hate it. It's gone way beyond any kind of protesting. They're just, a bunch of assholes. And I'm sorry, but they are. And they've wrecked downtown Portland. And what have they offered in response? You know what? It's like the people that blew up the Twin Towers. Yeah, great. The Twin Towers, you know what the sad part to me about that was? Those towers, I stood outside on the roof of the Trade Center. The airplanes, the Twin Towers, both of those things, and forget the people. They come, and all the people, all of the individuals of which one in the entire universe of each one existed, including the people that flew the planes in. Nobody offered an alternative viewpoint. They just burned it down. Let's just crash these planes and kill all these people, destroy the Twin Towers, destroy the airplanes, everything that human civilization has brought us to. And yes, good and bad. But you know what? Math, science, all the things that we basically invented and created, torn down in an instant. Nobody offered anything else of value. Yes, we hate the way you've treated us, so let's just burn everything to the ground. But it drives me crazy. Drives me crazy, all of this. I guess because I am a fan of civilization, and I like what human beings have done. Sure, have we done horrible, awful things? Yes, we're basically horrible, awful people. But there's amazing stuff going on with us too. Bobby Hatch Kowal is here. Our man who creates the greatest Halloween ever says, regarding objectively codifying filmmaking or visual aesthetics, look to music study. Our evolved music theory has successfully codified intrinsic human response to auditory stimulation. It's about time-tested, consistent, positive human response. I would agree with that. You know what? What a great example that we have figured out. And I think that's true because I think with films, there's an emotional response as well. Richard says, hey, Rob, where do I send my short story to? Also, will you read them on the air? Thanks. Good show. You know what? To be honest, Richard, I never thought about reading a short story on the air. Huh. I never thought about it. You know what? That'd be kind of fun. As long as people wouldn't think that I just pull stories out that I like. That'd be fun though to read. I wonder if I could get do an audio, like a live audiobook. Maybe I could find an actor friend of mine. We could read stories together. That could be dope. I love that idea. I didn't think about that before. But you send your short story to The Burnettwork.net. So let me just say, for those of you who don't know, hoping all the rest of the film festival movies are going to be up in the next 24 hours. And so all the films are going to be up, and then we're going to talk about it. The semifinalists, judges will weigh in, and then we will announce a winner. And Elizabeth was like, we can have a fireside reading. That'd be kind of funny. I guess I'd have to pre-record that. But if I fucked up, I'd want to go back and do it over. That'd be nerve-wracking, man. But let's see. So go to the Burnettwork.net website, and our main man Mike Bodden always does, the Burnettwork.net. The Burnettwork.net website, and let me just I have a lot open here, so it's hard to or maybe Mike's working on the website now. But there is a place where you can go on the Burnettwork.net website to submit your short story, and all the rules are up there. So, okay, contests. So if you look under the, it's at the top. There's little headers up there, and it says contests. And if you go down to the pull down menu, you will see where you can submit your story. Calvin R. Bowles comes back and says, "Can you name an objectively great movie that you personally do not like?" Oh, Mike Bodden is sending me the entry form. So that's good. I can put that. You know what? I'll put that in the live chat. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, here it is, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to put that in the live chat right now. Here is the entry form for the short story competition. It's right here. So there you go. Yeah. So there you are. Now, Calvin asks, an objectively great movie that I personally do not like. That's a good question. So I like so many movies. An objectively great movie that I don't like. I can't really think of one because I like all the objectively great movies. And when I think about the 100, like the AFI 100 greatest films. I can't think of one, to be honest. Stubble McShade says, objectivity in movies can be explained in a food analogy. There may be a perfectly cooked meal. What if it's very spicy? What if you're really hungry? The dish may be objectively good, but your personal taste and state of mind makes the experience subjective. I think that's absolutely great. I totally agree with you. I think that's a perfect way to put it. Sister Harrow sends in a super chat. Thank you, Sister Harrow. That's very nice of you. Thank you very much. Nice seeing you around these parts more and more. Stubble McShave also goes on to say, you've said that pop culture has a 20-year shelf life. What is the status of Godzilla and Kong shelf life? Well, I think most pop culture does. It's just like, look at like Shakespeare. Shakespeare's transcended time for hundreds of years. Godzilla and King Kong King Kong's been around. Well, King Kong's older. King Kong was a product of the 30s, and Godzilla was a product of the 50s. When King Kong was created, we hadn't created the nuclear weapons weren't created until well, we didn't drop one until the 40s. So King Kong is younger. King Kong's older than the bomb, but Godzilla is younger than the bomb. So, I mean, they've been around for King Kong since the 30s. That's, well, you're looking at what, 80 plus years or something? Lewis Tully. Oh, wait, hang on. Patrick Glanville says, when are we going to get that Blake 7 reboot? To be honest, I'm surprised we haven't got one already. I mean, Terry Nation, Blake 7's great. I love Blake 7. I don't know why we haven't got it yet. I'd love to get that. That'd be a great one to see. Come on, BBC, get on that. Lewis Tully says, The Dark Knight Returns works on so many levels. I think it does too. I love that comic. It blew me away when I read it for the first time. Brandon Sheehy says, Rob, have you seen Where the Truth Lies from 2005? It was panned by critics, but I found it a satisfying love letter to the Martin and Lewis era with a tense, sinister element added to it. Kevin Bacon and Colin Firth made a great acting duo and bring lots of depth. I have not seen Where the Truth Lies, but I like both Colin Firth and Kevin Bacon, so I'll I'll have to check that out. Richard says, aren't the protesters in Seattle and Portland fighting fascism? They say if you're not anti-racist, you must be a fascist. No, you know what? They might have been at one point, and then their point was made. I don't think anyone is fighting racism or fascism by smashing windows and marching down streets and getting in fights and closing down, basically closing down the downtown area of a modern metropolitan city. Portland, by the way, is a great place, and these people have succeeded in making it not great. And they have diminished every single person who lives in the Portland area. And good for you people, you selfish assholes. And you know what? I'm very sympathetic to everyone's plight. But when does the rights and the livelihood of your common man and woman and people, when do those rights get considered? These are people that have put themselves above their own community. And I think it's gross and it's disgusting. And if they really had the balls, they would go out and figure out a way to buy their own land and build their own civilization from scratch. Let's see them do that. But they don't, because they're not really protesting anything. Right at this point, they're basically trying to look, man, I went to school with a lot of people like this. They think they want to believe they're doing something because that's what they choose to believe. But it's because they're not doing anything else of value or note. And, yeah. Bob Quall says, all you have to do is listen. R.I.P. to one of the great all-time listeners, Larry King. Larry King passed away from COVID. By the way, I want to give a shout-out to one of the members of the Post-Geek Singularity, Jorge Nieves. His wife, he is an imagination connoisseur, and his wife passed away. Their family, he had written on Facebook at the beginning of the month that their family was hit particularly hard by COVID. His wife passed away. So, Jorge, I was thinking about you. I saw that you made a post about your wife, and it's very, very sad. I mean, I don't know how old you are, sir, but you look very young, and I know, at least from your Facebook, I believe you have a young son, and I feel terrible, and my thoughts are with you and your family. So I know I can't even, I don't even know what to say to that other than I was thinking about you, man. Anyway, I'm going to jump back into the letters. DK, ooh, do I like this letter. DK writes in. DK says, greetings, Rob, or as I call you, Mr. Imagination Connoisseur, the great nitpicker, and or Captain Contradict. You are an imagination connoisseur who nitpicks many fictional works and occasionally contradicts himself in most cases. I can dismiss it, but this time I had to write in a different perspective. I've grown used to your anti-matter Discovery rants, and in all fairness, you call out a number of blaring issues that Discovery has. But on your Season 3 show, number 597, you went hard on what the writers did to the Guardian of Forever. But you also contradicted yourself as well. Now, first I must state that I know The City on the Edge of Forever is Trekdom's all-time favorite episode, but for me, I must say that I so dislike this episode, maybe as much as you dislike Discovery as a whole. Now, let me stop you right there, and let me just say that whether you like City on the Edge of Forever or not, history has bestowed greatness upon that episode, as have Star Trek fans that have been around for a very long time. So I don't think we can, whether you like the episode or not, and everybody can like what they want and what they don't, but I don't think you can't know or acknowledge that City on the Edge of Forever is considered one of Star Trek's great achievements. Anyway, first, as a whole, I don't like time travel stories. Even though Star Trek The Voyage Home was very good, there are too many holes open and unanswered questions for me to take The City on the Edge of Forever seriously. We learn that this object, the Guardian of Forever, has been sitting here for, well, forever. And yet those that created it are long dead. Were they conquerors, scientists, etc.? We'll never know. And what a missed opportunity that none of the other Trek spin-offs, excluding Enterprise, ever followed up on that. Well, they did in the comics and they did in the novels, but a lot of that might have to do with the Guardian of Forever's creator, Harlan Ellison. Okay, let's say they were enlightened, whatever that means, and they created and used the Guardian of Forever to guide younger civilizations, and yet they up and left or were destroyed by who or what we never learned, but they leave the Guardian behind. Well, you've just made a lot of assumptions there about leaving the Guardian behind. No, there was something happened, and the people that created the Guardian are long gone, just like the people that created the pyramids are long gone. But we pretty much know what the pyramids were for. We just don't know how they were made. The Guardian sits here for thousands of years, even witnessing the Earth's beginnings, and yet no other spacefaring culture ever came across it to ask a question, nor to use it in whatever manner they chose. Well, has any spacefaring culture ever come across Earth? I mean, in the vast cosmic infinitude, that's a very real possibility. But suddenly the Guardian begins sending out time ripples. Why? That's never explained, and when the Enterprise goes to investigate, Bones wipes out Earth's past. Now, Rob, isn't that a paradox? Isn't that the grandson going back in time who accidentally kills the grandfather? So how can the grandson go back in time to accidentally kill the grandfather if he was never born? Well, if you know the episode, the Guardian planet, gateway, whatever you want to call it, exists outside of time. That's why when McCoy goes back in time and they're on the Guardian planet, the crew of the Enterprise, is still there. The crew that has beamed down. Uhura, Scotty, Spock, Kirk. The Guardian planet is, for whatever reason, as it's explained, is outside of that time continuum. Probably because the Guardian of Forever, which is generating these ripples in time. So I don't have a problem with that. That's a science fiction concept, and they do a pretty good job of explaining that on the show. So you understand that when McCoy goes back in time and has changed the past, our characters are still there because they are outside of the regular flow of time because of the Guardian. That's one of its properties. So I have no problem with that. I don't think that's a paradox at all. It's stated right in the episode. See, right there is my problem, and this is why I so dislike time travel crap so much. This is just one of the reasons why I dislike this episode. To me, the original writers did a piss-poor job developing the Guardian and just used it as a plot device to tell this offbeat Kirk love story. I found the Paradise Syndrome a far better Kirk love story. Okay, DK, Drift King, let me tell you something. City on the Edge of Forever is not simply a Kirk love story. City on the Edge of Forever is an incredible tale about, well, it's a great science fiction story about how one person can affect the events across hundreds, if not thousands of years, simply by their very existence or non-existence, as it turns out. The love story is, I think, a B story to what's really going on, and that is, how did Dr. McCoy affect the timeline? What actually went on there? And what went on there is the fact that his involvement in the mission and Edith Keeler's life caused her to not die. She went on and became an activist and stopped the United States from entering World War II, and Germany and their V-2 rockets were able to capture the world via nuclear weapons. I mean, that's what the story is all about, and how one individual's actions can have ramifications that ripple throughout time, and how the idea would be that us, the viewers, perhaps there's something we might one day do that will affect somehow the timeline or something. Okay, Mr. Imagination Connoisseur, you display so little imagination here with this Discovery episode. You fault Discovery's writers for going back and using the original idea of the Guardian. They cast Paul Guilfoyle as its avatar, and that's just how I and so many of my friends saw that. In this time and timeline, if Klingons approached the Guardian, it would present a Klingon avatar. Now, honestly, where is this such a terrible idea? The Guardian claims to be so much more, both machine and being, yet neither. It is its own beginning and is its own ending, Alpha and Omega. Only God has that title. How blasphemous. Does God have that title? Yet it has no moral compass and or rules which would prevent anyone from accidentally or willfully altering the past, present, and future. That's correct. Now hold on, Rob. Here's a little conundrum for you. What if someone wanted to go back and undo the Guardian's creation? The way the original writers framed it, the Guardian would be okay with that and would allow it. Not a bad premise. What would be the outcome of that? Again, if you went back in time and you undid the creation of the Guardian itself would still be there because the Guardian is outside of the timeline, as stated in the episode. But let me get back to this. In no place, no way, shape, or form does it ever state in City on the Edge of Forever. If you're talking about canonical, you have canonical fealty to a story. The whole point of that is that we understand, and let me use let me first address one thing. The Guardian of Forever, as presented in that episode, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty self-explanatory how it all works. The Guardian is a machine. The Guardian was a machine that was built to present the past in that manner, in the manner it was constructed. That's how, when the Guardian says it has no beginning and no ending, it's specifically referring to itself and time. I mean, clearly, he does say it was made. It says, I was made to show the past in this manner. So even the Guardian understands that it was made to do this. The Guardian doesn't have an avatar. Keep in mind that I get now people have virtual worlds and avatars and all these things, but science fiction is steeped in a certain reality. It's an extrapolation of the reality that we have. There is nothing that was stated in City on the Edge of Forever that the Guardian could either be moved or it had an avatar or the Discovery episode tells us, the episode that the Guardian appears in, the two episodes, that somehow the Guardian does have an avatar, a guy that's Paul Guilfoyle. Why Paul Guilfoyle? Why does Paul Guilfoyle walk around in clothes from Earth? None of that makes sense. I suppose you could say that, he's an avatar. I get it. I get you understand all these concepts. But there's nothing in the original conception, aside from, of course, you could go back and say, well, Harlan Ellison's script, but you can't do that. You have to only go by, well, I mean, look, it's fiction. You can do anything you want. But in order to make me believe and to make other people believe in your fictional universe, you have to have some consistency there. And the City on the Edge of Forever is very, very consistent, and it pretty much explains exactly everything you need to know. Discovery says to you that no, actually the Guardian is a dude, is an avatar of some kind. And yes, you're probably right. If it had an avatar, it could appear as whatever you would appear as to you. But that this avatar can walk around and it somehow beams the Guardian into wherever, and then it can reassemble the Guardian, and the Guardian works wherever it happens to be put down. I mean, that's not like I said before, that'd be like saying the pyramids do that. Like one day we're going to find out, when there's enough advanced science, that the pyramids actually have an avatar. No, I mean, yeah, sure, you could say the Guardian is some kind of an AI. It's a machine. It's pulsating with power. And it was created, as it says, to show the past in this manner. It does not say anything about being ambulatory or moving around. And because it's part of the ruins, it's shown there's ruins in the distance. They're insinuating that it's as much a part of the ruins as everything else. If it was ambulatory and could have left, I mean, as the Guardian says in City on the Edge of Forever, since before your sun burned hot in the sky, I've awaited a question. Well, if it was ambulatory and had an avatar, why didn't it pack up and leave and go set up someplace where somebody knew where it was so they could ask him a question? The point is that the way Discovery changed what the Guardian was, sure, you could accept it, but as far as suspension of disbelief or science fiction is concerned, it doesn't work. It's bad science fiction. Everything that we've seen in The Guardian of Forever would tell us that, no, you can't do this. And I guess if anything goes, I mean, sure, you could say anything is true of anything if you want, but in the Star Trek universe, there's certain expectations about how things work when they're already set up. Discovery, they don't adhere to any of it. They don't care. The writers don't care. And in terms of you're talking about the alpha and the omega and the moral compass, the Guardian of Forever is a crucible that our characters go through, and any other characters that find it. It's all about making certain choices. I mean, think of the Guardian of Forever as a plot device, and it doesn't. First of all, another thing about the Guardian of Forever is portrayed in Discovery. Suddenly, the Guardian of Forever is some kind of a teacher. The Guardian of Forever shows up like the ghost of Christmas fucking past and is going to teach you a lesson. You know, it's like an angel from It's a Wonderful Life. Let me tell you how to fix your life. Which there's a whole set of like, how does it know this? Is it looking over you? Why are you more important than the other hundreds of trillions of beings in the universe that it can go talk to? Just because you're on your way there? Does it wait for people to come? Why that planet? Why didn't it leave that planet? None of it makes any sense at all. But anyway. Even Kirk wants to use the portal to go back and prevent Bones from accidentally injecting himself. Now, that's for good reason, but how many cultures and individuals would want to use the Guardian for evil? A lot. When Kirk and Spock reset the timeline and they all come back, all Kirk says is, let's get the hell out of here. What? No Federation task force? No Starfleet planetary security to prevent malevolent cultures from misusing this thing? They just leave it, really? And Trekdom considers this to be the best episode? Right. Said like Dr. Evil. Look, I think, frankly, you've missed the entire point of the episode. And if you read any other fiction, even the animated episode yesteryear, the Guardian of Forever is one of the most, heavily protected places in the Federation for this very reason. So, Rob, you then go on to compare the Guardian to Stonehenge. Now, I don't see the correlation as the Guardian practically claims to be a deity. You contradict yourself when you say it's all fantasy now because the Guardian can travel around and conjure portals, and that no one can pick up Stonehenge and move it all around. Yet, Rob, ancient man moved these rocks and built Stonehenge. And Rob, the Guardian is a time machine that claims to be its own beginning and own end. Talk about fantasy. Well, the Guardian is, again, a machine. It's not ambulatory. It doesn't have an avatar that does the work for it. It's built into this planet. It's probably deriving its power from a power source that we haven't seen. You have to extrapolate these things from reality. What is the Guardian? The Guardian is a ruin. It was built by a long-dead ancient civilization. Where did they go? Well, I would posit something that we learned about in Star Trek's penultimate episode, All Our Yesterdays, the episode that came at the end of the third season, right before the last episode, Turnabout Intruder, when the Enterprise is going to study the Beta Niobe star, which is about to go supernova, and they beam down to a planet. And they find on this planet a library where Mr. Atoz is there, Mr. A to Z, Mr. Atoz, and you find out that the inhabitants of this planet, Sarpedon, knew that their star was going to go nova. So they had some kind of, who built, we don't know, but there's a time portal that was constructed, and everybody who lived on Sarpedon was able to go choose a place in the past where they would go live to save themselves, because they were not a spacefaring people, so they couldn't escape the destruction of their planet when their star went nova. So they went into their past. Well, maybe that's what the people who built the Guardian of Forever did, or maybe they went into the future. Who knows? But the thing that I most object to is what you talked about, is that Paul Guilfoyle, suddenly the Guardian of Forever, now has agency and decides to do things. I mean, the Guardian is now, it's like Doctor Who. He's he's somebody that's making decisions. You know, the Guardian doesn't have agency. The Guardian can't tell you what to do. The Guardian only serves, it's just a tool. It's just a machine. It doesn't make moral judgments. Whatever you do, it's outside of that continuum anyway. So, I guess, Rob, for me and others like me who don't see a big difference between fantasy and sci-fi, in fact, they're always grouped together as fantasy and sci-fi. I've long accepted that fantasy is a lie make-believe, and so is fiction. That's the definition of fiction. So concerning sci-fi, and I'm stressing the word fiction, which means lie, because someone is lying about the science, period. I find it puzzling that you, Mr. Imagination Connoisseur, find it so improvable on a show where anything can happen, anything, that the Guardian couldn't have learned how to evolve. We all hoped for Data to evolve. In fact, that was Data's main story arc, to become more human. Yet he was vastly superior to humans, but he wanted to be more human-like. The Changeling probe evolved, Voyager 7 with a little help from Machine World evolved, Voyager 6 actually. The Enterprise D evolved and became a living entity for an episode. I see a pattern forming here. So for the Guardian to grow beyond its limitations, being able to move and hide itself if need be, and in order to interact with life forms, they have the ability to project itself in a familiar pattern. Why is that so horrible? Why is that such bad writing? I found what the Discovery writers did to be very logical, and after all these years, they made the Guardian acceptable for me. Now, Rob, if it's just the truth that you don't like the Discovery writers taking liberties with such a beloved character from such a beloved episode, I understand. But the way I see it is the Discovery writers fleshed out a character or plot device far better than the original writers ever did. You then accuse Discovery's writers for being cheeky and wanting to change everything just to change everything. But isn't there this copyright issue that there must be a 20 to 25% difference in the prime timeline? Maybe. All you nitpickers seem to forget that so easily. See, Rob, for me, it's first and foremost in my mind when I watch Discovery. In fact, this is how I'm able to watch and enjoy Discovery, because Discovery and Picard are both in an alternate timeline, but in another universe. A universe where logic isn't always logical and the science is a bit more fanciful. Rob, I'll end this with you. You end all your shows with every person you meet has a story to tell, and all you have to do is listen. And that gives me hope in there being a place like this for like-minded people to share and discuss the things they love and enjoy. I hope this difference of perspective leads to a broader mindset. Hailing frequencies close, Rob, and the word is given. DK. Well, DK, first of all, I appreciate you writing in, and I thank you for that. Look, I think I've stated my position on this, and I can appreciate that perhaps maybe you don't need to put the same intellectual rigor into Star Trek that I do, but I can't buy it. As somebody who's grown up loving science fiction and fantasy, and they are very different, mind you. They are very different. They're not the same at all. Let me say this: science fiction and fantasy as a literary genre, and movies and television spill over into that, are not the same. And I think the one thing that they do have in common, however, is both science fiction and fantasy rely heavily on creating a believable universe for the stories to take place in. Each, whether it's Tolkien and Middle-earth, whether it's Larry Niven and Ringworld, whether it's the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever, or whether it's the saga, Julian May's Saga of Pliocene Exile, if you've ever read those, which are pretty good. They each one of these things, each writer or each storyteller has to create their own universe. And their own universe has to have a consistency and a believability to it. And to me, what the Discovery writers did with the Guardian of Forever was very inconsistent with how the Guardian of Forever was conceived of as we saw in Star Trek's first season. I understand that they probably thought they were being cheeky by going back in to Harlan Ellison's original script, but Harlan Ellison's original script was rewritten, and rightfully so. And I think what they did in the episode City on the Edge of Forever, especially with the Guardian of Forever, they made it much more believable than Harlan Ellison did. And the writers for Discovery just decided that they could go ahead and change what had been done. And they felt that way. They have no... And so because of this, I don't believe what they do. I don't believe the stories they tell. The stories they tell are wildly inconsistent with what came before in Star Trek, and they're wildly inconsistent internally themselves. Let me ask you this. The idea of a sentient being being able to literally shout in fear, and because in utero that person was on a planet that was made of dilithium, so they themselves were genetically changed, that them being scared and shouting out caused all the dilithium in the galaxy to explode, to blow up. Do you think that that's good storytelling, good science fiction? I don't. But maybe that's just me. Let's see. Wow, there's a lot. Alexander Wilson says, we have to pay respect to Hank Aaron. He holds the Guinness World Record for most mail received by a private citizen. Is that true? What a cool thing. Majority of that was hate mail and death threats. Oh, well, I guess it wasn't cool. He wouldn't let that affect him and made history that only steroids could break. Yes, that's true, and it's too bad that steroids have been allowed to break those things. But I didn't know that. Wow, I didn't realize that he had suffered that kind of hatred. Dieter Bastian says, Dieter, hello, sir. The Ecstasy of Gold should open Elizaviews tonight, intercut with eye shots of you both. I know, Rob, music copyright strike, but it would be awesome. That's actually pretty funny. I could do that. And you know what? I have to come into the frame like this, like the first shot in the movie. The Richard says, that STD letter was amazing. What's better, telling some story or spending that time giving visibility to the people in our society that don't have rights? Last time I checked, that's what Star Trek is about. I think Gene would have loved Star Trek Disco. I think that Gene Roddenberry wouldn't have loved Star Trek Disco because I'm going to disagree with you. Because Gene Roddenberry's stories were while they dealt with things like racism and they dealt with all kinds of things, the stories were more important. And the best Star Trek was not the most heavy-handed Star Trek. I mean, the thing about Gene Roddenberry was he showed by his multinational crews and the fact that he frequently put people of color in place as they ran star bases, they were geniuses. That kind of representation went a lot further than just telling a story like "Let That Be Your Last Battlefield." I think Gene Roddenberry was interested in telling great stories first and foremost. And look, Twilight Zone, Star Trek, they all told powerful, hard-hitting stories about race. But the stories themselves came first, I think, before people. Telling some story or spending that time giving visibility to people in our society. Gene Roddenberry gave visibility to people in our society, and then he also told stories. He didn't allow representation to supersede the great stories he was telling. Representation was already baked into the concept of Star Trek. Yeah. Mike Castro says, is that Mike Castro who made There's Something in the Silence? Mike Castro says, cultural relevance. We had a horror short we made that got attention from Hollywood producers with a first look deal with New Line. They wanted to make a feature out of our short, but they needed me to make it culturally relevant and relatable. I think that's become a requirement to get films sold to studios now. They kept referencing Get Out for the type of thing they were looking for. Yeah, and you know what? I think that's lame. I think that's lame. Because, first of all, you're making a horror movie. See, the problem, here's the thing. The motion picture studios, you never get rich in Hollywood by following a trend. You have to set a trend. Get Out was made by Jordan Peele. It was a very unique film, and it deserved the kudos that it got. But now everybody wants to copy it, and they don't even understand why. Get Out was not a movie that just was about making it culturally relevant and relatable. Get Out was a great story. Get Out was a great story that dealt with things that Black Americans have been dealing with for 400 years. There was a truth in Get Out, and that truth was true for everybody. Even myself, as a white man, I could look at Get Out. I wasn't offended by it. I'm like, this movie is working because it's so fucking true. Daniel Kaluuya, I'm like, I get it, man. I get the situation you were in. And it was metaphorically, it worked. I thought it was great, but it didn't work. Get Out worked on so many other. It didn't work. Get Out was not a movie that was only about that. It also worked as a great story about one individual who found themselves amidst great evil. It also had obviously a racial component and a social satire component, a lot of things. But it wasn't successful only because Get Out, first and foremost, was successful because it was a great horror movie. It was a great horror movie. It was a great story that everybody could relate to. It didn't matter what color you were, you got it. That's lame. That's what they want. But that's their problem. That's the world that we're living in now. And that's why so many studio movies, that's why the entertainment business is in trouble. They forgot that great stories must come first. And you know what? Great stories have those things baked into them already. And that's why Get Out was so good. Casual Cup says, hey, Rob, adapting science fiction books to movies is always tricky. Usually these movies end up so different from their book counterparts. Why is it so hard for studios to stick to the source material, Ender's Game or Artemis Fowl? Yeah, the endless conundrum. Why do they feel that way? Because, well, I think it's because it's really hard. You know, a lot of books are very difficult to adapt simply because they don't always adhere to formulaic storytelling, which is by definition sometimes what movies need. So they have to make movies fit that paradigm, which is kind of a bummer. And that's why, Stubble McShave says, over or under 40% Wanda will end up as the villain by the end of WandaVision. Stubble, I think by the end of episode 3, I think it's above 40%. I think that Wanda's going to break free and all hell is going to break loose, and she's going to be part of the big bad, or maybe the big bad in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I think that could happen. Cobra Kai Never Dies sends in a super chat and says, out of these black and white movies, which would you like to see come back in a color movie? Charlie Chan, Mr. Moto, or Mr. Wrong? Whew. I don't know. I don't know if we should bring any of those back now, to be honest. If you did something like if you updated, if like what they did with Charlie Chan, if you like the TV series Sherlock, if you did something like that with Charlie Chan, but made it less, racist, I would love to see a story about a kick-ass, like, Asian detective, that traveled the world or something like that. But that's why I'm excited to see Shang-Chi with Simu Liu. I can't wait to see that. But, yeah, sometimes certain black and white movies maybe should be maybe be left alone. Richard says, I was being facetious before. I dislike Star Trek Discovery. Aren't most of the issues here having a writer's room full of 22-year-olds? I feel like it's happening more and more. I thought experience and life examined made a good writer, not otherwise. Dude, I agree with you. Sorry, I didn't realize you were being sarcastic. I agree. I think that's the look, everyone's having good intentions. I mean, obviously, the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests we saw this summer, these were not bad things for happening, but they have been twisted and turned, and the meaning by the people, like what's going on in Portland, or what's happening in academia, or all this. There's a lot of weird things that are happening as a result of this that are I think twisting the message around. And the message first and foremost should be, how about let's not kill people because of the color of their skin? Why don't we give black Americans the fair shake they have never had in this country? Never. They don't even get a fair shake when it comes to COVID. Black Americans are more susceptible. Anyone black in the world is more susceptible to the virus. And I mean, the fact is, we have a community of people that have never been given a fair shake in the United States ever. And this is something we need to address and take care of. And we don't. Even after Black Lives Matter, what are we going to do? How are we going to change these things? How are we going to make sure that this kind of racism, and clearly bringing a Confederate flag into the Capitol, shows that we have a lot of work to do. And those protests were correct, but there's a lot of work going on. People wanting to fly. There's a lot of white power racist motherfuckers in this country, and we should start addressing those things. We never really do, because let's face it, we are a very racist country. And hey, we can acknowledge that. It's true. And the sooner we start addressing these issues, the better off we're going to be, because they're not going away, as they haven't in 400 years. So anyway, Sub McShave says, good sci-fi and fantasy focus on interesting ideas and fascinating characters. A difference is that sci-fi focuses more on ideas extrapolated from existing science. Fantasy focuses more on archetypical characters and their inner turmoil. Both can serve as a commentary on our world. I totally agree. Cobra Kai Never Dies sends in another super chat. Well, Cobra Kai Never Dies, I very much appreciate the support you've shown the channel today. Listen, we got a whining about movies that we're going to do in 2.5 hours, so I got to jump off this show, man. What a great show this has been. I feel like what a fun show. I really like that. And remember, as Marvin the Paranoid Android says, this will all end in tears. I love this shirt, by the way. Look at that. It's Marvin. I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed. If you guys haven't listened to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio show, I don't know what you have. I don't know what you're missing. Commander Claudius says, Bonsoir, Robert. Was there a list of views last night? No. Did we already do the good, the bad, and the ugly? No. We're doing that at 7:30. Remember, Rob, there are two kinds of people in the world, those with guns and those that dig. You dig? It's true. That's a very Cloudminder's way of thinking. That's another third season Star Trek episode. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, all of you across these 28 known galaxies, I am ending this episode of Robservations, the show about something. Robservations, episode number 603. Wow. Anyway, join us at 7:30, where Elizabeth and I, we feel the ecstasy of gold. So there you are. Star Trekker 58 says, modern writers get to be too successful too soon, I think. Assume in the past they had to wait longer and actually learn the craft before being let loose. Hey, let me read this again. Modern writers get to be successful too soon. Assume in the past they had to wait longer and actually learn the craft before being let loose on the public. I agree with that. Look, I think that, and I don't speak because I know a lot of very smart writers, but the way I see it is I think that our writers today, a lot of our writers, have done more watching of media than they have of reading books. And I think that we see that in the storytelling. I think storytelling has become overall less literate, and that's kind of a bummer. And the industry has become a lot less literate too. So I think that's problematic. But anyway, I'm going to jump off this call, or jump off this show, whatever you want to call it. I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank the Richard. By the way, the Richard's back. He's back in rare form, killing it out there. Watch parties, dance parties, raves, I don't know what, but it's tons of stuff. So go to the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page, go to the Whining About Movies Facebook page, go to the Let's Get Physical Media Facebook page, and go to the Fully Articulated Facebook page. And if you don't want to go to Facebook, totally understand. You don't have to. But you can also go to the Burnettwork.net website. So I want to thank my moderators. Justin Toner's here. Bunyan Snipes here. Joshua Levesque is here as well. I don't know who else is here. I think I got everybody. I want to thank all of you for supporting the channel generously through Super Chats and tips. Appreciate that. You can become a member. We're going to start up some member perks. It's a new year. So if you're a member, we're going to start doing little after shows where no Super Chats and tips allowed. We're just going to hang out and chat. and I'm going to finally put up my Drunk Moonraker commentary just for you guys. And the film festival is almost concluded. And, you know, what I want to get as much eyeballs on the film festival as possible. So for the next couple weeks, tell your friends and watch films and give them a thumbs up. Comment on them. That's right, the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival. Who's done that before? Come on. And the short story contest is open, and so is the cover contest for our anthology, The Imagination Connoisseurs. So we'll see. Apparently, we've got like 10 stories already. So that's pretty exciting. I have not read any, but I'm looking forward to delving into them. But on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And the ace, the arbiter of cinematic excellence and the enchantress of entertainment, and I will be back here in a little over 2 hours for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Wow, wow, wow. Have a better day.